Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the February 7th meeting of the Thousand Oaks City Council to order. Can we all please rise and can you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have the city clerk please do the roll call?
Councilmember Fox is absent at this time. Councilmember Gillette is absent. Councilmember Glancy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bill De La Pena.
Present.
Mayor Irwin.
Here. Item 4, request for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. There are none. And now we're going to move to the special presentation portion of our City Council meeting. Please give me a moment while I move to the podium. To begin our special presentation tonight, we would like to welcome Barry McCone, our newly appointed Cultural Affairs Director. Barry? Barry officially joined the city February 6th, and we're looking forward to benefiting from his talents. And he comes to us from the Alex Theater in Glendale. I am going to let Mark Watkins, our Assistant City Manager, tell us more about Barry's background. Mark?
Thank you, Mayor Irwin, members of the public. We're very excited to have Mr. McComb come to work for us. As many of you recall, Tom Mitzi was our only theaters director and opened this theater. We put together one of the most grueling recruitment processes that we have ever put together in the history of the city, and it ended up being very successful with Barry agreeing to come to work for the city. Prior to coming to Thousand Oaks, Barry worked for Glendale Arts and the historic Alex Theater. He was their chief executive officer for a number of years. Before that, director of corporate entertainment for Caesars. Mr. McComb brings energy, enthusiasm, a true business sense to how a theater needs to be run. He's worked for both private enterprise, for nonprofits, for cities, and he knows how to bring the successful shows, how to take the fabulous foundation that we've built here and take it to that next level. So I want you to all help me in welcoming Barry to the City of Thousand Oaks, and we'll let Barry make a few comments quickly also. Thank you, Barry. Thanks.
First of all, it's so nice for the football team to come and help welcome you tonight. Mayor Irwin and members of the council, let me just start by saying I'm very humbled to have been selected to follow in Tom Mitzi's amazing tenure at the helm of the city's Cultural Arts Department. During the last 11 years that I was working in Glendale, I always looked upon Thousand Oaks with envy. And I say that because Thousand Oaks is a unique city in that both as a city and as a city council, you really embrace and are committed to the arts and the role that the arts play in maintaining a high quality of life here for local residents. You also recognize that the arts generate jobs, can attract cultural tourism, and also serve as an economic catalyst. As a city, you've made a significant investment not only in the Forum Theater here, but also the Kavli, providing world-class venues for performers to come and appear in. You also have a community that is rich with performing and visual artists and a large number of extremely active arts and cultural organizations. But most of all, the residents of Thousand Oaks are both consumers and very active participants in the arts in very large numbers. So needless to say, I have always aspired to work in a community like Thousand Oaks, and really looked upon Tom's role here with envy all these years. And I'm very excited to be standing here in front of you tonight and to be given the opportunity to lead the city's Cultural Affairs Department. Although I only officially started yesterday, I've had several opportunities to interface with the Cultural Affairs staff over the last month prior to my arrival. And just within the last 2 days, we're already starting to spend a significant amount of our time working on Tom's efforts to enhance and expand the quality of programming and attract bigger numbers of people to the cultural offerings here in the city. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be focused on meeting with members of the local arts and business community, and I look forward to meeting the many residents as they come to attend performances at the theater. So you will see me in the lobby, and I encourage residents to stop and say hi and introduce themselves to me. Once again, I'm very honored to have this opportunity, and I look forward to serving the residents of Thousand Oaks. Thank you very much.
We are certainly very happy to have him join us. For our second special presentation, we'd like to ask Woody Schmeck, the superintendent of the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Park. Oh, there you are. Woody, we're very pleased to have you here. Woody is leaving our area. He's being promoted to the deputy superintendent of Yosemite National Park, another jewel in our park system. We wish to we wanted to wish Woody all the best and to thank you for your excellent work in protecting the gorgeous Santa Monica Mountains recreation area. Woody was assigned to our park 21 years ago and in the position of superintendent for 11 years. We can all see the fruits of his efforts. As we drive through the Conejo Valley, we're able to enjoy the beauty of our surrounding mountains. Woody, we wish you good luck in your future job. I know you will be successful in your efforts to preserve and protect the precious attributes of Yosemite National Park. And Woody, would you like to say a few words?
Real quick, I just want to say thank you, Mayor and members of the council and the great city staff that we have here. It's been truly a privilege and an honor to be part of the Thousand Oaks community. Most of you know we have our visitor center and our administrative offices here, and it is just an honor to be able to administer our treasured Santa Monica Mountains parks for the benefit of the people here in the community. So thank you so much for all your years of support.
And we, on behalf of the entire City Council, we would like to give you a commendation in honor of all your years of hard work. We really appreciate everything you did for our area, and again, good luck on in your next endeavor. Thank you. And this evening, we have some familiar friends visiting us to celebrate this special time of year. It's Dr. Seuss's 108th birthday. Would Colleen Briner Schmidt please join me at the podium? All right. Colleen is the president of the United Association of Conejo Teachers, and we are delighted to have her here today. For the past several years, the Conejo Valley Unified School District and the United Association of Conejo Teachers has presented the Read Across America program. It's a wonderful literacy program for our youth. Before I present our proclamation recognizing March 1st, 2012 as Read Across America Day, Colleen, can you tell our audience about the importance of the Read Across America program, please?
That Sam I am. That Sam I am. I do not like that Sam I am. That Sam thinks he is just so cool because he learned to read in a Conejo Valley school.
Do you like to read all day?
I do not like to, Sam, I say.
Would you read books here or there?
I would not read books here or there. I would not read books anywhere. I do not like to read all day. I do not like to read, I say.
Would you read books in a house? Would you read books to a mouse? Would you read books in a box? Would you read with Mr. Fox? I know you read, while I'll even bet you'd like to read with Mr. Gillette.
Not in a house, not to a mouse, not in a box, not with Mr. Fox. Keep those books in a set. I will not read with Mr. Gillette.
Come on, reading is fun. It will tickle your fancy. Would you read with Mr. Glancy? Books are amazing. They put your mind in a whirlwind. Come read a book with Mayor Irvin. The excitement is there. It is hard to contain. Yeah, if you only will read with Miss Bill de la Peña.
It is not fun. It is not fancy. I will not read with Mr. Glancy, nor Miss Bill de la Peña, nor Mayor Irwin. I don't care what they've been doing.
Now, you don't like to read, or so you say. Try it. Try it, and you may try reading. And you may, I say.
Stop. If you will let me be, I will try to read, and you will see. Say, I like to read this book. I do. I think I'm hooked. Find all the books that you can get. I want to read with Mr. Gillette. Hurry now or I'll get antsy. I can't wait to read with Mr. Glancy. I'll read books in a house. I will read books with a mouse. In a box with Mr. Fox. I'll get stirring with Mayor Irwin. You tried so hard. I really don't blame you. I can't wait to read with Miss Bill de la Peña. I will read books here and there. I will read books everywhere. I even like to read about ham. Thank you. Thank you, Sam I Am. Like any skill, reading requires practice, and when students read, they get better and better at it, and if they read for fun and learning, it's even better. McDonald's spends $3 million a year in advertising, but the best advertising is for an adult to model reading themselves and to read with a child. This year, the National Education Association is teaming up with the producers of the Lorax and will be co-sponsoring that. It does open on Dr. Seuss's birthday. And then the California Teachers Association is sponsoring, their program is Dig Into a Good Book, and Boris Ate a Thesaurus is one of their books, and Gabby the Gator is the other. So we encourage everyone to read to a child every day, but especially on Dr. Seuss's birthday. We will be holding an event with the Thousand Oaks Library, at the Thousand Oaks Library and the Newbury Park Library on the eve of Dr. Seuss's birthday, March 1st, from 4 to 6 at both libraries.
And on behalf, again, of the City Council, we have a proclamation in honor of Read Across America Day. And I've had the good fortune for the last few years to be able to read at Madrone Elementary School. I encourage all the council members to see if they can read at one of their local elementary schools. The kids really enjoy it, and you'll have a great time. So thank you for everything you do, Colleen.
Thank you so much.
You're never too old, too wacky, too wild to pick up a book to read with a child.
You're never too busy, too cool, or too hot to pick up a book and share what you've got.
In schools and communities, let's gather around. Let's pick up a book. Let's pass it around.
There are kids all around you, kids who will need someone to hug, someone to read.
Come join us on March 1st at both libraries that day.
And make this America's Read to Kids Day.
Thank you.
And our final presentation is a group that's been here many times before. Westlake High School is yet again in the spotlight for another spectacular win in the CIF championships. And they had an extraordinary season. I'd like to hear from Coach Benkert if it was their best team yet. Thousand Oaks is fortunate to have several first-rate teams, and tonight we are recognizing the Westlake football team for winning the CIF Southern Section Northern Division Marmonte League Championship. And they did make it all the way to the state finals. It was quite something. And now I'd like to introduce Coach Benkert to tell us about his team.
Good evening, City Council and Madam Mayor. what a great ride that we had this year. Starting up in Sacramento against a great Del Oro team who also made it to the state finals, and going through our league season, and then our rematch with Oaks Christian in the title game for the CIF championships. I know some of you were there, and we appreciate all of your support all the way to the state championship game. And I never in my wildest dreams would I say that a high school football team with an enrollment of 2,300 would represent the open division in the state of California, but this team did accomplish that, along with the Marmoni League Championship, undefeated Marmoni League Championship, as well as the CIF Championship. Just a great event for our Canal Valley Unified School District, for Westlake High School, and for the community of Thousand Oaks. It's just been so enjoyable for me as a head football coach, and I can't say enough of these young men, not only what they do on the field, but also what they do in the classroom. So I'm going to introduce a few of our captains and let them say a few words. And before we came out here, I said, I'm going to have you guys say a few words, because nobody wants to hear from the coach. They want to hear from the players. And so I think they're more nervous to come up to this microphone than they were before that state championship game. So let me introduce our captains. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then they have a few things to say. And I think David's going first.
David Nunez. It was great being all these teammates. We worked all together. We're a family. We stick together through the hard times we had during the season. I don't know what to say. I guess that's it.
Hi, I'm Jose Muguerza. I'm one of the captains. First, I want to thank you guys for having us here. It's quite an honor. As many of you guys know, we adopted the motto Band of Brothers quite a few years ago. And for all of us up here, we take that to heart. For us, being a Band of Brother is always having your teammates back on and off the field, and always doing everything in your power to make the team better. So the reason I think we were so successful this year is because through the hard times, we were always there for each other, and we had each other's back. All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is David, and we all like to thank you for inviting us.
Now I'm going to have the players come up to the microphone. They're going to say their name, the position, and their year, and then we're going to stand out here for a picture.
Reno Dubriel, linebacker, freshman.
Sodior, senior, long snapper.
Kyle Roschler, outside linebacker, junior.
Kyle Erickson, defensive end and tight end, junior.
Joe Rzuzinski, offensive lineman, junior.
Jefferson Hagan, offensive line, junior.
Irvin Diaz, defensive line, junior.
Clayton Johnson, junior, outside linebacker.
Hunter Maddox, freshman, tight end.
Fred Wise, offensive line, freshman.
Cole Hare, wide receiver, sophomore.
Jonathan Wildbacher, sophomore, kicker.
Deshaun Hunt, cornerback, running back, junior.
Cody Tuttle, receiver, senior.
Devin Jury, wide receiver, junior.
Brian Baldwin, wide receiver, junior.
Devin Ray, linebacker, junior.
Sean Hagee, receiver, senior.
Garrett Hardy, outside linebacker, senior.
Adam Arnott, offensive lineman, junior.
Jake Roschler, junior, wide receiver.
Vincent Goldberg, wide receiver and outside linebacker, senior.
Tony McCary, offensive and defensive line, junior.
Brendan Ray, offensive, defensive line, junior.
Tyler McGee, wide receiver, senior.
Alex Ball, kicker, senior.
Randy Sue, long snapper, senior.
Nathan Fan, corner, senior.
Jonathan Lukowski, defensive line, and I'm a junior.
Again, truly an outstanding accomplishment, young men. I don't know if you'll ever experience anything like this again in your lives. So congratulations, Coach Spanker. You do have winning ways. And this is a commendation in honor of the 2011 Westlake High School Warrior football team of the CIF Southern Section Northern Division Marmonte League. And, the council members are up, and we'll all take a picture. Okay, can I have the city clerk please announce public comments?
This is the time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. Speakers for public hearing items shall be called and heard during the public hearing. All remarks should be addressed to the City Council as a whole, and all documents for City Council and the official city records should be presented to the City Clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. Under state law, public comment matters may not be considered by the Council unless listed on the agenda, but may be referred to the City Manager for administrative follow-up. 5 people have presented cards, and pursuant to Council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
All right, our first speaker this evening is going to be Dr. Richard Elsey, and he will be followed by Debbie Gregory. Good evening, Dr. Elsey.
Good evening, Mayor Irwin, members of the council, and TOTV. I've put a slide up here. You can flash up if you want to. My name is Dr. Richard Elsley, Dr. Discovery. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks, and it is my pleasure to be here again to tell you about another talk in the Discovery Center's Science Speaker Series. The purpose of the Science Speaker Series is to bring in scientists who are doing interesting research and who can describe it in a way that anybody can understand and enjoy. Our next talk is 2 days from now, Thursday, the 9th of February, 7:30 p.m. at Baxter Healthcare on Lakeview Canyon in Westlake Village. The speaker is Dr. Bruce German of UC Davis. He's the director of the food nutrition program there. It's important that we have foods that have all the nutrients that we really need. It's important for us in this country. It's even more important for poorer countries where food is in short supply. So how do you find out what nutrients we need? Well, one way, there is a food which has been around for several million years that has been perfected by evolution to be the ideal food for human infants. It's milk. So his research has involved looking at everything that's in milk, all the proteins, all the amino acids, figuring out why it's there, why it's good for babies, and then seeing which of those things would be good for all of us and how we could make sure that food contains all of those. His talk is Diet and Health, What Can Evolution Teach Us? So again, that's Thursday, 7:30 p.m. at Baxter Healthcare in Westlake Village. If you want more information, go to our website, which is sciencespeakerseries.org. sciencespeakerseries.org. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Debbie Gregory, followed by Nick Kidway.
Good evening. I'm Debbie Gregory. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. I haven't been here for a while, but I think I'm concerned about something that a lot of other people are concerned and offended by, and it's timely, especially with water rates being proposed to go up, with services cut back, the hours of City Hall, with fees going up. It's very timely. I want to talk about something that I consider to be an abuse of power by elected officials on this dais. 2 council members sat on a committee to determine whether or not that they should get lifetime health care free for themselves and their families for being on the council. I think it's a conflict of interest. Any reasonable person would say to have the 2 people whose health care was affected to be on the committee. But that was the committee. There weren't any citizens. There was no oversight whatsoever, and that is wrong. Additionally, we were told that if we did not give it to them, the city could be sued. So I'd like to ask the question, who was going to sue the city? Council members Irwin and Glancy, who sat on this committee, if they didn't get lifetime health care. Their decision on the committee was to give themselves the lifetime health care, but all future council members would not get it. I've gotten a preliminary legal opinion, and they feel that it can be challenged on grounds that there was a conflict of interest. In the meantime, I'd like to tell you about a couple of my friends. Maybe you guys have heard of J.R. Martinez. He's a wounded warrior that won Dancing with the Stars. J.R.'s had 33 operations. J.R., when he gets married and he's expecting a child, his family will not get free health care, and certainly not for life. I want to tell you about another friend of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Karcher. Tim had 3 deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. On the 3rd one, while he was commanding his team, he lost both legs in an IED attack above the knee. Tim's family, Alicia and his 3 daughters, will not get lifetime health care. And then there's the families of the fallen. They don't get it either. So I don't think that you should, and I think we need to go back and revisit it, because the cost of lifetime health care for these 2 council members and their families could exceed $1 million each. In declining enrollment, it just is wrong. It's wrong to have the people who benefit from the decision making the decision. These 2 people are running for office, and I intend to make this a major issue. I'm asking you to do the honorable thing and revisit it and revoke it. If not, a blue ribbon committee will be formed, and we will do it for you. Thank you.
Mr. Kidway, followed by John Fonte.
I begin in the name of God, who is most beneficial, most merciful. My name is Nick Iqbal Kidwai. Last time I checked, Dr. Glancy is still Director Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks with no lapel pin. Honorable Mayor, I'm here to say RIP to RDAs. What a wonderful evening. As of February 1st, California redevelopment agencies are officially dissolved. Fiscal reality led to their demise. Of California's 482 cities, 368 were home to redevelopment agencies. It is an extremely rare case of the state abolishing an entire bureaucratic structure. Created by the legislature in 1952 to clean up blight in older cities, redevelopment grew up to consume over $6 billion annually in local property taxes. That's 12% of all property taxes statewide. With the state virtually broke, these losses were no longer sustainable. These funds will now be returned to local government and to education where they belong. Redevelopment lobbyists and lawyers fought attempts by both Governor Schwarzenegger and even Governor Brown to use redevelopment funds to fund public schools. And now the governor appears determined to veto any extension or revival of RDAs. Bye-bye RDA, especially TO RDA. With this resolution, K-12 education will ultimately receive $3 billion in additional revenues. Community colleges will receive $300 million, Dr. Glancy, and special districts will receive 450, special districts like the Caneo Rec and Park District. Before that happens, however, $100 billion, I said $100 billion of redevelopment bonds must be repaid. This from cities that are not allowed to have debt. Redevelopment was never intended to be permanent. While funds were properly used for public infrastructure, they had become cash cows to subsidize big box stores, retailers, NFL stadiums. Our wonderful auto mall got a $6 million plus loan with no discussion, nothing on the agenda. Movie theaters or Crusoe's wonderful lakes next door that is subsidized for $1 a year. Whether RDAs were successes or failures, they simply became too costly to maintain. Public subsidies are a poor way to stimulate economic development. In fact, one of the statements that the city is supposed to give to the state as to what they owe, they have all kind of, it's like a Christmas list of fraud. I use the word very lightly. And I just talked to the good doctor, Discovery, because they have $5 million shown for the Discovery Center, which is a complete fraud. TOTV, if you can show the minutes there from the Board of Supervisors on the overhead TOTV. Our minutes are so bland, they show nothing. So you know nothing as to what is happening. There's a young gal that went to the inauguration of the chair and talks about getting a Slurpee for walking the precincts. And those are all the notes. We need to get back to a good government. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. John Fonte. I live in Thousand Oaks, more specifically Dos Vientos Ranch, part of Thousand Oaks. And I'm not here tonight to talk about your obscene lifetime health care benefits for a part-time job, which can cost $1 million apiece, as a prior speaker spoke about. But I am here to speak about an issue that city staff is having problems addressing. Every year since the original construction of Dos Vientos, and that's over 10 years ago, more like 12 years ago, the Dos Vientos Ranch East Homeowner Association has been placing sandbags on the Corral Trail at the northwest corner of Lynn Road and Via Las Bricias for 6 months or more, spanning the rainy season. They make the area look like a construction zone, a natural catastrophe zone, or both. They also don't help adjacent homeowner property values. There must be a design and/or maintenance defect in the Corral Trail, which flows sand, gravel, and debris onto the public streets when it rains and into the storm drains. Is the use of sandbags on a regular basis part of the original development plans that the city approved, or is it a violation of the municipal code? Over the past 7 years, my homeowner association board and I have been trying to get this HOA to fix this visual blight. And if TOTV could pan onto the picture, TOTV. And the sandbags do go up way above along the corral trail. Well, as of today, the sandbags are still there, and over the past few years, we have made numerous requests of city departments to intervene. Your planning department, your public works department, and now your code compliance department. While city staff says they want to help, the sandbags still remain in place. And now all I get from Jeff Ware, the code compliance manager, is a vague statement about the city following a process. I can't even get confirmation from him that the municipal code is indeed being violated, but I'm sure it is, unless sandbags were approved by the city as a 6-month seasonal erosion control device, and I can't imagine that. So I'd like an answer, and I'd like to get moving on this issue because I'm not getting anywhere with staff. I'd like to make one more comment with regards to the water rate speakers, and it's about an issue that I've spoken about before. The people at the front desk are advising speakers that they can speak at the public hearing or submit a written comment card. The public hearing is obviously later in the meeting. They are not being advised that they can speak here at public comments earlier. I've seen people now already turn in statement cards to go home because they can't stay later. That is a travesty, and that should be stopped. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fonte. And Mr. Mitnick will address your concerns at the end of public comments. And our last speaker for agenda item number 6 is Maura Lederer. Good evening, Ms. Lederer.
Good evening. My name is Maura Lederer. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks since the year 2000. And the previous fellow who spoke actually told me that I could speak at this time for the agenda item 9A, the tiered water rate structure. So I'm taking the opportunity to do that. And I just wanted to register my approval or my backing for the tiered water rate as it's currently proposed. I am a larger lot owner, and I've taken a lot of steps already to minimize my water usage, use pool covers. I've re-landscaped some of my area to take out lawn and use California native plants, but my water bill is still pretty substantial. So I think that the tiered water rate is a great way to go because it encourages people to reduce their water consumption, but it doesn't unfairly penalize people who have larger lots. So just want to say that, and thank you very much for all your hard work on the issue.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lederer. Mr. Mitnick?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, just a reminder, residents can speak under public comments on any agenda item, but they are encouraged to speak when the items are before council, so their concerns are clearly brought to your attention, and so they're also part of the record. One speaker talked about the medical insurance benefit for city council members. As a reminder, this issue was discussed over a series of public meetings, and the council committee that worked on this, as well as staff, did work with the Ventura County Taxpayers Association. This city council was, I believe, the first in the county to deal with the issue. And what I propose that we do is, well, staff will follow up with the speaker and be happy to sit down with her and go over what was done and what was discussed in the public meetings and what will happen going forward. So again, we worked very closely with the Taxpayers Association, and they told us they were pleased with the outcome and the direction that the city took. With respect to the Dos Vientos Ranch water issue, staff will follow up on that and work with the applicable HOA out there to address those concerns. That's it. Thank you.
Ms. Bilda-Pena?
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to the comment made by the city manager, if the public is told that they can indeed speak during public comments on an agenda item, then they should be informed about that when they sign up. If people are indeed filling out a written card and going home because they think they can't speak during public comments, then that's a problem. So we need to let everybody know that they are able to speak on an agenda item during public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. All right. Can we please move on to item 7 and have our city attorney announce the closed session?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. City Council will now convene in closed session for a conference with legal counsel. Anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9B, one potential case. Thank you.
I just wanted to let the people that are here for the water rates know this is going to be a very quick closed session. We have moved most of the closed session to the end of the meeting this evening, but this one is time sensitive, so we will make this as quick as possible. I'd like to thank all of you for your patience. We are on item 8, the consent calendar. Anybody like to pull anything? Questions? I'm actually going to pull item 8D. Motion?
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move a consent calendar except for item 8D.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have public speaker cards also. I am very sorry about that. Why don't I first ask Mr. Spurgeon about item 8D? That's the authorization to purchase 4 trucks, and I was very happy to see actually that we have a Thousand Oaks dealer that is going to be providing us with the trucks, but I would like you to explain why the first 4 dealers, including Silver Star Chevrolet, were not meeting the minimum specification.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Actually, there were 3 bidders that did not meet minimum specification requirements. Basically, they bid on only a portion of the 4 trucks. So, for instance, our local Chevy dealer bid on 2 of the 4, and our bid requirements do require that a complete bid be submitted. So, we couldn't consider their bids.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, we have 2 public speaker cards. The first is Mr. Kidway. Good evening again.
Good evening, Mayor. Resident of Newbury Park, Director Concerned Citizen of Thousand Oaks. Thank you for letting me speak on the consent calendar. So I still have a job because the consent calendar still needs to be brushed up. It's not clean enough. I would like TOTV to briefly show the overhead. This is the minutes of the last council meeting. Those are the people that spoke. And it's a new law, in fact. Before, the city had gone from not putting down the positions that people took and what they said in 1 sentence or 2 sentences. This doesn't even say who's pro or con. I mean, so if you, and this is about the redevelopment agency hearing, and so if anybody wants in Sacramento to look at, well, what did the people in the city say about it, I guess you can go to the video, but the video is only available 90 days. It's very sad what the city does. This is the minutes from our school board. I don't like to show other agencies, but Mr. Dunn, who's a trustee, thanked me, and it's in the minutes. I was just shocked for my work on providing them redevelopment agency information. On our side, they do give 1 or 2 sentences as to what the citizens have said, but they don't give the names. They say Speaker 1, Speaker 2. I mean, so it's, I mean, we are losing our government, unfortunately. I mean, this is the best government. The flag is still there. I want to get back to business. Approved expenditure, number C for lighting and landscaping. That, as well as D for the trucks and the security cameras, the Hillcrest roof project, Wendy Drive. I mean, we've heard complaints from the city manager saying that are not a tax city. I mean, we don't have utility taxes. Money has been stolen. I mean, there's so many sources of funds. It's not even funny. I mean, that's why people like us say, and conservatives say, is that the problem is not lack of taxes, it's how the taxes are misspent. It's good that the trucks are being bought from locally, but if you look at the blog on Ventura County Star, there is a point. I mean, automobiles and trucks have changed. You don't need to change the oil in a truck or car every 3,000 miles. They go 10,000 miles. You don't need to replace a truck, in my humble opinion, and I've managed a fleet even 30 years ago. Every 2 or 3 years, you can go 5 or 7 years. But you folks are always in such a hurry to move the meeting. The decision is made by staff, and the city council people don't take an active interest in these things to save the taxpayer money.
Thank you, Mr. Kidway. Our next speaker is Jonathan Deckel. Good evening, Mr. Deckel.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and distinguished members of the Council. I'm legal counsel for SHE Engineering and Construction Group, Inc. And we object to the approval of the agreement with Brannan, Inc., DBA Smith Electric Service. That's item F on the consent calendar. We disagree in the strongest terms with the recommendation that the delays on this project were attributable to SHE. We also disagree in the strongest terms that SHE's work was non-conforming or somehow defective. Beginning in late or middle of November 2011, the city suddenly, and without any warning or explanation, suddenly attempted to shift blame and responsibility for the delays on this project onto SHE. At the time, SHE repeatedly provided the city with explanations and supporting documentation showing that the delays on this project weren't attributable to SHE. No meaningful response was provided. Since that time, SHE is completely cut out of the project. All of the weekly meetings were canceled. There was a weekly meeting every week on Thursday. They were all arbitrarily canceled, abruptly canceled. The city's conduct in handling this matter was hasty, it was improper, it violated SHE's contractual rights, and it was completely unjustified, factually and legally. Proper procedures weren't followed, reasonable notice wasn't given. The actions taken against SHE were without justification. And in fact, this meeting, which clearly has important implications for SHE and its contract rights, and SHE wasn't even given notice of it, wasn't even given notice that this item was on the agenda for tonight's meeting. What SHE respectfully urges that the city carefully consider this matter. I would respectfully request that the council take it under submission and carefully look at the facts underlying this project. I'm afraid that if the requested action is taken, it's going to expose the city to substantial liability. I have some of the documents that SHE had provided in December. These are only some of them. I'm happy to provide it to the council if the council would wish to see them and take this matter under submission.
Thank you, Mr. Deckel. Does any council member have questions for Mr. Deckel? Mr. City Attorney, do you have a response?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, just as a reminder that I have spoken in a confidential manner to you about this, but I'd be happy to look at any documents that the Speaker is providing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norman.
Thank you.
We have a motion? Dr. Glancy?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Did you get 8D settled to your satisfaction?
I did, thank you.
I move the consent calendar.
Vote, please.
The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Gillette absent. I have a couple of ordinance titles. to read an ordinance amending Chapter 10 of Title 9 of the Municipal Code by adding Article 7 concerning incentives for building affordable housing on small and underutilized parcels, MCA 2010-70420. That's item 8H. And then 8I is an ordinance amending Articles 2, 9, 24, and 25 of Chapter 4 of Title 9 of Municipal Code regarding parking structures and development standards for multiple family housing, MCA 2010-70422.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. And we are on to item 9, public hearings. Can I have the city clerk please open the public hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 9A, the water and wastewater connection charges and water rate adjustments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing. All documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking, and speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. 14 people have presented speaker cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers will have 3 minutes each. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. And Mr. Spurgeon is going to provide the staff report this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the public hearing for water and wastewater connection charges and water rate adjustments. With me on the dais this evening is Joanne Kelly, our Public Works Resource Division Manager, and Kim Baylor from NBS Consultants, who assisted us in preparing the financial plans. We also have in the audience, I'm pleased to say, the general managers from the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, Mr. Jeff Keitlinger, and Susan Mulligan, the general manager from Cayugas Municipal Water District. These are the two wholesale water agencies that supply treated water to the city. They will be providing a brief presentation following my remarks. Also, we have Scott Quady, who is a board member on the Cayugas board, representing the Thousand Oaks District. Scott, you can, there he is. So we're very pleased to have them with us and able to provide some information and answer questions that you may have. In about a year ago, January 2011, the City Council appointed a Community Water Rate Structure Committee. This committee met about 10 times and provided an in-depth review of the city's water rate structure. They looked at all components of the structure, and in July of last year, presented a number of recommendations to Council, including a change to the single-family residential tiered water rate structure, and that the tiers be eliminated and a single commodity rate be adopted. Council considered the recommendations and provided some direction to staff, including that the tiered rates for single-family customers be maintained, but that the pricing differential between the tiers be much less aggressive, essentially to flatten those tiers. So last December, we came back to Council, presented water and wastewater financial plans, which included different pricing strategies for the tiers, which we'll cover momentarily, and then set the public hearing for tonight. Tonight's public hearing was set so that a minimum 45-day protest ballot process could be undertaken in compliance with Proposition 218. The city clerk at the end of the public hearing will provide a tally of the valid protests that have been received as part of that process. First, I'm going to talk briefly about connection fees. These are fees that we charge new development. This is carrying on long-term city council policy, that new development pay its fair share of costs of both water and wastewater utility infrastructure. These fees are not paid by existing utility ratepayers. And we have in our ordinance the ability to increase those connection fees by an inflationary factor. This year that factor is 0.94%, so just under 1%. And here's the proposed change for wastewater, an increase of $96, as you can see. And then Here's a comparison of our connection fees with some of the other local agencies. We are one of the highest, and again, I think that reflects the policy that, development should pay its fair share. Water connection fees, likewise, the same inflationary increase, a $41 change. Here is the comparison with some of the other water purveyors. Note that California American and Cal Water Service are two private purveyors that serve other portions of the city, do not charge a connection fee pursuant to their rate structures governed by the Public Utilities Commission. The good news for tonight is our wastewater service charge of $25.45 per month will not change. We do not need to adjust that. We've had that $25.45 for 8 years. This is a reflection of the ability for us to control really our destiny in the wastewater utility. It's much different on the water side, and we'll talk more about that. But in terms of wastewater, we can implement efficiencies and control our operations, maintenance, disposal, and it's reflective in our service charge, which is the lowest in the county, as you can see here. Now, lower rates are not necessarily a marker of success. Now, for us, we're the upper left smiley face because we do have a low rate, but we also are able to fund all of our capital infrastructure needs, our replacement, our ongoing maintenance, debt payment, everything that we need to do in our wastewater fund, we're able to do with that rate. Some agencies in our county have kept their rates low, so they're kind of the lower left. Not so happy. They have low rates, but they're not meeting their needs, and unfortunately, some of those agencies, smaller agencies in our county, have had significant, in fact, very significant increases in wastewater within the last several years because they've had to catch up. They haven't been putting enough money aside and so forth. So just because we have a low rate doesn't necessarily mean that it's successful. Of course, in our case, it is. So on to water rates. This is a history of our wholesale supply rates. This really tells the story on the water side. Over the last, since 2003, the cost for imported water have increased 130%. About 2005, we were about $500 per acre foot, and this year we surpassed $1,000 an acre foot. Very significant impacts to all of us, all of our residents, the city. We're water customers as well. And again, the general managers with us tonight are going to talk a little bit more to you about why this has occurred, what's going to happen in the near future, and frankly, what we're all doing collectively to keep these rates as low as possible. Just in context, an acre foot of water is about 325,000 gallons, which would serve about 2 or 3 homes for an entire year. So that's just in context. Our water financial plan provides a number of policy recommendations. This one has to do with providing enough revenue to fund a operating reserve. The recommendation is for a 60-day operating reserve, about 16%, a little over 16% of our total annual operating expense. This previously, our goal was about 25%. So this go-around, we felt that was just too difficult in our current economic climate and rate climate here. So going forward, this is the recommendation for the operating reserve. Capital facilities, very important to maintain sufficient revenues for future infrastructure replacement. As everywhere, our water infrastructure is aging, and we need to have sufficient money set aside to address our future needs so that we don't have to have huge increases in the future. That is currently equal to about $1.7 million per year. That's the contribution to that fund. So overall, looking at our existing revenue structure, what we need to going forward to include these factors, the increase in purchase water costs, capital reserve, and operating reserves, an adjustment is required. And that's about a 10.2% overall adjustment. The strategy includes base charges, tiered rates, and the single commodity for other customers. By the way, I apologize, on this slide, the period, the rates will go into effect March of 2012, this year, not 2011, so I apologize for that. But one of the things is, I think a take-home message is that this 10% adjustment covers essentially a 3-year period. We have not adjusted rates on our water since July of 2010. These rates will get us through essentially July 2013. So in context, although a 10% adjustment is not a happy thing, it really covers about a 3-year period. That's, I think, a significant testament to our ability to operate this fund within the constraints that we have. There are several components to the rates. The base rate is proposed to be adjusted about 10.2%. These are monthly rates, monthly charges that are paid whether you use any water or not. One of the recommendations from the Citizens Committee was that these rates be increased to help cover our fixed costs. Whether we sell any water at all, we have fixed costs, and so rather than rely on the variable water purchase rates, it's more stable going forward to have a revenue that is fixed, and that's what this does is it covers all of our fixed costs that we have from Cayugas, because they have a fixed component and a variable component, and then half of our internal city fixed costs. So again, that's what the Citizens Committee had recommended. These rates get us there. Tiered rate for single family. Again, the direction from council was to flatten those rates, those tiers, and previously we had over 20% cost difference between Tier 1, 2, and 3. Now the proposed rates are much flatter, 7.5% each between the tiers. So that's what we're proposing here. Estimated monthly charges for several water use categories, 10, 17, and 40 cubic feet per month. You can see that the average water user over a year is about 17. So you can see that the increase in monthly costs ranges from about $7 to $11 per month with the proposed adjustments. For non-single family residential, the consumption rate is proposed to adjust by 11%. Lift charges are to cover additional pumping costs for residents that live higher in elevation in the city. We have several zones, and so there's pumping costs. We're actually recommending an adjustment downwards due to operational efficiencies. We've improved some of our pumps, and also basically we had less increases in our Edison rates than we had anticipated. So that's that one. This is a comparison then with some of our sister purveyors, Cal Water and Cal American as well, for various water consumptions. It's difficult to really do an apples-to-apples comparison. This is a snapshot in time. This does reflect the current rates for these various agencies. We know, per the two asterisks, that both the private purveyors in the city will be adjusting their rates later this year and certainly next year, because they will need to pass through increases in wholesale water that will be applied in January of 2013. Again, our proposed rates here will cover all of those increased costs through the middle of next year of 2013. So again, it's difficult to do this comparison, but as a snapshot in time, this is where things are at, and as the other purveyors adjust their rates, then there'll be a shift in this table, obviously. So now we're going to have the general managers provide their briefing. Mr. Keitlinger from Metropolitan Water District will go first, and he'll be followed by, by Susan Mulligan. And I'm going to get their presentations up here.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and Council and staff. It's a pleasure to be here. We do have a presentation somewhere. There it is. And we're going to talk about Metropolitan's rates, budgets, who Metropolitan is, what exactly it is we do, and I'll do this in just a few slides and keep it fairly brief. As you're probably aware, Metropolitan is the regional water wholesaler for Southern California. We're just that light blue area. It's about roughly 5,200 square miles in Southern California. What we do, our governance structure, is we supply water to 26 member agencies, and that's for 19 million residents. 19 million is half the state's population, so that water supply is for half the state in terms of population, though it's a pretty small geographic area of the state. And our regional economy here in Southern California is over $1 trillion, which is about 60% of the state's economy. Our total water demand, our retail demand in 2009 is roughly 4 million acre feet, and Metropolitan sold 2 million acre feet that year, so we're pretty much half the region's water supply, the other half being local. But that only tells part of the story. We have parts of our service area, San Gabriel Valley, Orange County water basins, very productive, that only purchase 10-15% of their water from Metropolitan and have access to cheaper local supplies. And then we have areas like San Diego County that has to purchase about 90% of their water from Metropolitan. And right here, also very heavily reliant on imported water because they don't have the groundwater basins when you get up into the Ventura, Callegas area. So what are the main sources of water to Southern California? Well, the city of Los Angeles built its aqueduct to the Owens Valley on its own around 1900. Then in 1930, Metropolitan was formed to build the Colorado River Aqueduct that you see delivers water from the Colorado River to the east. And then in 1960, Metropolitan teamed up with Governor Pat Brown in the state of California to fund and build the State Water Project that delivers water from the Sierras to the north. And then our other major supplies are our local supplies, which tend to be the local rainfall that's captured in our groundwater basins. We have very productive groundwater basins. And then conservation and recycling supply the rest of that local supply. Here's kind of where are we spending the money and where do we do that? If you look at the big yellow block there, that's the State Water Project. Metropolitan committed in 1960, after considerable debate and a fair amount of arm twisting by Pat Brown at the time, to pay for half the cost of the State Water Project over a 75-year period. So that was committed in 1960, and our contract runs through 2035. And that we pay half the cost, and it's what's called a take-or-pay contract. So if it delivers not one drop of water, we still pay half the cost, and if it delivers a lot of water, we pay a little more for the electricity, but we have to pay half the cost year in, year out for the bonds on that project. Massive project, if you've all seen it, if you drive down a Highway 5. But if you see that's the single largest bill we have, it's roughly $500 to $600 million every single year that Metropolitan has to pay out of our roughly $1.6 billion budget. The other major pieces of it are capital financing. That's that next tier you see. We're spending roughly about $350 million a year on capital program financing. What have we got for that the last few years? The last 15 years, Metropolitan has built and funded a Diamond Valley Lake Reservoir out by Hemet in the Riverside area. It more than doubled Southern California's total water supply in reserves at a cost of $2 billion. We had to build a 40-mile pipeline tunnel system to connect it into the rest of our system. That was another $1 billion. And over the last decade, we've had to upgrade all our treatment plants to ozone treatment because of ever more stringent water quality requirements, and that's another $1 billion we spent. And we've had to spend about another $1 billion over that period in terms of upgrading the overall system. So the last 15 years, we've spent about $5 billion into our entire system, and that's represented by that pieces. You see that relatively small green bar. That's where we go out and actually purchase water. Most people don't realize, they think, a big part of our cost is going out and getting water. Not really. The cost is in the concrete, steel, and pumps to move the water. Most of our contracts for water are given to us in perpetuity through the state of California and the Colorado River with the United States government, and we don't pay for that water. We only have to go out and buy water in drought, so you see very small the last couple of years in terms of water supply, as we've had a little bit of good water years. And in 2009, 10, 11 drought years, we had to go out in the market and buy more water. Then you see the last couple of pieces are O&M costs, relatively flat. That's really the cost of labor, chemicals, things like that to run our treatment plants. And then just a little sliver of power up at the top where we have to go out in the market and buy power to run our Colorado River Aqueduct. Not as big a driver as you'd think. And then finally, that last piece we call demand management. Every year, Metropolitan goes and directly funds conservation throughout our service area. We fund water recycling, reclamation. We spend about $80 million a year. All those are projects to help reduce our reliance on imported water throughout Southern California. So what do we get for that money? Well, there's an incredible grid of pipes that Metropolitan has. That's sort of the backbone infrastructure that delivers all that water. And then those red dots are 5 treatment plants. 4 of those treatment plants are in the top 10 in the world in terms of size. So these are massive treatment plants that deliver more treated water than any other agency in the world. And then you see that yellow bar is the Colorado River Aqueduct that moves water all the way from 250 miles from the east. And I'm sure some of you have taken a tour at some point or another of our facilities. So those are pretty impressive facilities. Colorado River Aqueduct, I mentioned, built 1930s, State Water Project 1960s. These are 75 years old, 50 years old. So you can imagine there's a lot of work going on maintaining those facilities and upgrading them as time goes by. This is just sort of a slide to kind of give you a feel for how things are done in the water business in terms of these massive infrastructure projects we do. You see these huge spikes. That's because it typically takes about 10 to 15 years to build the kind of projects we do, from inception to actually completion of them. And so you have to plan way ahead. And what happens is you plan way ahead, and then all the costs kind of come at the tail end when it's completed. And so you have these spikes like that, and you'll see our rates over the years kind of follow that same bar. One of the things I think that's a pretty important driver here, too, for people to understand, that light blue bar is repair and replacement. If you see just as early as, it wasn't that long ago, 1995, that was just in the tens of millions of dollars. It's now $200 million a year we spend repair and replacement. And that's just because our system went from being 50, 60 years old, a relatively young system, to 75, 80 years old. Concrete, steel, it's all wearing out. And the tough news on that for people is that's sort of a forever cost. It's like how you paint the Golden Gate Bridge. Once you're done on one end, you turn around and go back the other way. As we have to continue to maintain these systems that our grandparents built for us, these are going to be legacy costs that are going to have to be done so we can also turn over these facilities for our grandkids. Next slide. This gives you a feel for our revenue. Where does the money come from that we spend for this $1.6 billion? Primarily, it's the sales of water. That's that blue bar. And it's changed over time. The rest of that are just, we have various other charges, but they're relatively small. So almost everything we do, about 80% of our revenue is collected on the sale of water. And that drives a few things. Let me take a look at the next slide. This is a look at our rates. This sort of corresponds to what you saw in terms of how we built things. So, and if you look here, I think it's only going back, I can't quite see it, but it looks like about 2000. We had 8 years where we didn't raise rates at all. Those are all zeros in there. And then you see this big spike in rate increase as all the cost of that massive infrastructure development from 95 to 2005, all those costs kind of came due. And then you see that tapering off, and now we're down into the 7.5% ranges, and then you see it projected to go to 5 and then 3. And that's part of the pro and con of tying most of your costs, your revenue, to the sales of water. Well, then we have to raise rates on that as those costs become due, because we don't collect ahead and hold on to these huge reserves. So we could have, set up a system maybe where you raise your rates 4% every single year, build up the billions of dollars, and then pay it off over time. Or you raise your rates like this to then when the costs become due. And that's kind of the structure that has typically happened in the water business. Next slide. This shows you how it's shifted over time. When Metropolitan was formed, we were going to be building these incredible facilities throughout the desert and to bring water here, but we were going to go 15 years without selling a single drop of water. So everything had to be collected through property taxes because there was no water revenue for quite a period of time. And then you see historically, the property taxes, as they paid off the initial payment into the system, have declined, and everything is shifted over to water rates. So you'll see now roughly 80% of our revenue is collected on the sale of water. But one of the interesting things is about 80% of our costs are fixed. Whether we deliver one drop of water or not, 80% of our bills come due every single year to the State Water Project and to repair and replace the concrete and steel that we have in the ground. And so that imbalance has put a little more volatility into water rates as systems, as times change. So those are some of the challenges. Here's some of the good news and what we've managed to do with what we purchased. What we did starting in the 1990s was really began building up storage reserves and a really robust Southern California infrastructure that could deal with drought. We just went through from 2007 to 2010, the second driest period in recorded California history. As a prudent measure, we asked everybody to conserve 10% over that period of time. If we were in the same boat without the things we built in the 1990s, we'd have had rationing at 30, 50% levels, mandatory rationing. We'd have been in very difficult times. Even at the peak of the drought in in 2009, we still had 1 million acre-feet of water in reserves when we were asking people to cut back 10%. Then we had one window, basically in the middle of 2010 through 2011, we had a very wet window of time. And in that period of time, we were able to capture 1.5 million acre-feet and move it into storage. And we're going to finish this year with our highest reserve levels in Metropolitan's history that will basically really drought harden this area for the next 3, 4, 5 years, even though 2012 is shaping up to be yet another really dry year. And if we were in the same position we were in 1990, about 75% of that water would have gone to the ocean. We would not have been able to capture it, but for all the new reservoirs, the facilities we've built that have been able to allow this region and economy to continue to grow. So still have a lot of challenges. Obviously, I understand rates and these issues are very difficult for cities, but we are getting value for it. We are replacing the infrastructure, and we want to continue to work with our member agencies like Cayugas and all our sub-agencies like the City of Thousand Oaks. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Irwin, members of the council. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight. I'm Susan Mulligan, General Manager at Cayugas Municipal Water District. We're the next wholesaler down the chain between Metropolitan and City of Thousand Oaks. And I just want to share a little bit tonight about the cost of reliability for Cayugas and how our rates have been going and how they're set up and things we've been doing in City of Thousand Oaks. Next slide. Cayugas serves water to almost all of Ventura County south of the Santa Clara River, which is most of the populated part of Southern California. We were formed in 1953 to bring water in, and after looking at various alternatives, Metropolitan was chosen as the best alternative. So some facts about our water rates. Our increases have been driven by the need to fund infrastructure projects. We've been working on developing local supplies to reduce the need for reliance on Delta supplies. We are also working on rehabilitating aging infrastructure. Our O&M costs, which include salaries, chemicals, vehicles, pumping costs, electrical costs, that sort of thing, have been held in check for the last 5 years. We've raised rates less than 1% each year over the last 5 years. We had no increase in 2011 or 2012. We plan no increase in 2013. And the way we're doing that is trying everything we can to be efficiently using energy resources. We've invested in reservoirs, many of them in Thousand Oaks, so that we can pump off peak and save electricity. We built hydroelectric generators 30 years ago and are using hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in revenues from those to offset water rate costs. As gas prices have risen over the last few years, we've been rotating to smaller vehicles, the smallest one that can be used for a particular task, and we've dropped our gas costs in the last 4 years. Additionally, over the last decade, despite adding 12 wells, 2 reservoirs, a treatment plant expansion, a large pump station, and 25 miles of large diameter pipe, we have not added a single staff member. So have we done that? And that's largely through automation, automating monitoring controls of facilities, water quality, automating our task management and our work scheduling, and just trying to work smarter. So we've held the line on costs. So the components of Callejas' rate are, the big piece is Metropolitan, and you've heard from Mr. Keitlinger about their costs and their challenges. The other pieces, 19% of our rate is comprised of Callejas capital costs, and 5% is O&M, which is the salaries and chemicals and the like. Next. In the last decade, Callejas has invested over $37 million in Thousand Oaks. There is more storage in the Thousand Oaks portion of our system than anywhere else. I'm not sure how it got developed that way, but that's how it is. And we've done seismic analyses of the reservoirs and found that they all needed to be upgraded. We upgraded the Newbury Park Tank in 2002, Westlake Reservoir over on Falling Star off of Canaan in 2007, and currently, I'm sure you've all seen the scar on the hillside across the way, and that is our Thousand Oaks Reservoir, and we're turning it from a tank, which needed seismic retrofit, into a buried facility, which will look just like the hillside when it's all done. Our 10-year capital improvement program really is focused in 4 areas. 2 of them are local supply and developing our local supplies. The well field is a supply which allows us to have water when we're cut off from Metropolitan, both for routine maintenance and really very critically in the event of an emergency earthquake. We have 1 connection to Metropolitan. Our system's vulnerable. The state project is vulnerable in many places to earthquakes. And the well field that we have out in the Moore Park area will provide our whole service area with water, and that's part of the investment. Another part of the investment on supplies is the salinity management pipeline. That's a pipeline that will facilitate construction of desalters, one of which I understand City of Thousand Oaks is looking at investing in City of Camarillo, which will allow you to have a reliable local supply and be able to mitigate future rate increases, because the cost of running that desalter is going to be less than the projected costs of imported supplies. About a third of our capital budget is 34% is for infrastructure rehab. Our system's only 50 years old, but it's starting to need rehab as well. And then the 5% is for efficiency and security projects, similar to the automation that I discussed earlier. This capital improvement program includes some investments in Thousand Oaks' supply reliability. We will be building Granson Pump Station Phase 2, which will allow for well-filled water to be pumped to the Simi and Conejo valleys. Right now, it's only can reach the lower portions of our system. That should be in construction in about another year. We're also putting standby generators at the well field, because when there's a big earthquake, there's often not power. And that's another investment that we'll be making. And then finally, the salinity management pipeline, which I discussed earlier. Finally, just an aside, we're also committed to community outreach in Thousand Oaks. We've partnered with Conejo Recreation and Park District and the Master Gardeners to build a garden over at the Conejo Creek North Park by your community center, and hope to see all of you at the opening in May. So I'll be available to answer questions.
And Madam Mayor, that concludes our staff presentation. Our recommendations for adopting the ordinance for water and wastewater rates are before you, and all of us here, including the general managers, will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions of staff? Councilmember Bill de la Pena.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Spurgeon. The question I have is, when we had our water rates committee, were they given the same information by representatives as we are receiving tonight? I'm
going to have Mr. Watkins, who was the staff liaison to the committee answer some of the rate committee members.
And I'll answer that only because I was the staff to the committee. Mr. Spurgeon wasn't as involved. So the answer is no. We did not have the representatives from the two different water agencies come. We did spend the very first meeting basically going through a lot of the same information, kind of the history of how water evolved in California, how Thousand Oaks is interconnected with the plumbing within Cayugas and the rest of the state, and those general issues. So we went through them, basically spent probably about 2 hours at the first meeting going through how water works, how water rate structures work and all that, but not with the other agencies.
Okay, thank you. Is this the time to ask questions of the representatives, or should we wait until after? Okay, now, thank you. Let me just make sure that I have the name of the gentleman. Is it Keitlinger?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for coming tonight and giving the presentation. I have to ask the obvious question that is also, I'm sure, on some people's minds regarding O&M, operation and maintenance. Is that benefits, salaries, and all of that?
Correct.
Okay. That seems to be a large portion of the overall budget. In fact, the City of Thousand Oaks sent a letter of protest to the pension increases that were proposed a few years ago of all the employees that we thought was outrageous. How does that factor into the overall water rate increase?
We have kept our O&M costs flat over the last 5 years. We have reduced 300 full-time employee positions, which for us is about 15% of our overall staffing over the last 3 years. And so we are trying to keep that labor cost down as much as possible. The other major place where we have cut back has been infrastructure. We have deferred most growth-related projects throughout Southern California, given the state of the economy, and really just focused on repair and replacement. So those are the two major areas of cutbacks that we have pushed back throughout Metropolitan to try and hold those O&M costs as flat as possible.
Are there any increases in the near future?
Increases in rates or
salaries or benefits?
Benefits have stayed the same since they've actually been reduced through the last labor negotiations. Medical benefits have gone down. The pension benefits have remained flat, given people commenting that they didn't want to see any increases in pensions, so there's been no increases there. Individual employees are eligible for merit increases as they become due, and those would occur throughout the normal course of events.
Thank you. And the same question for Mrs. Mulligan. Your predecessor was reported in the paper as having received a huge salary. I think it was about $300,000. And so I'm wondering, how are you handling your salaries, benefits, O&M? Are there any increases there?
Well, my salary is substantially less than what his was. It's about 30% less than what he went out with. I believe his final salary was $260,000. Mine's $200,000. So they save some money right there. We have not changed our benefits. We have given annual cost of livings to our employees, which I know the city has not. We don't have unions, and we recently did a benefits survey. The board wanted to compare how our benefits were compared to other entities who buy water from us, including Thousand Oaks, and we are roughly average as far as the benefits that we provide.
I am asking the question because it was actually raised with the Water Committee with a couple of members who were concerned that increases in salaries and benefits were being passed on to the consumer, which of course they are.
They are, but our salary increases have been negligible.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Fox?
Yeah, Mr. Spurgeon, let me, I think, get to the crux of what a lot of the questions may be. The staff report indicates that the overall percent increase is 10.2%. And then I think in your presentation you broke that up into basically three distinct values or reasons for that. One was for an increase in costs. We're paying more. One was for capital. And then one was for reserves. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Of the 10.2%, how much is for capital? I looked through the report. I'm sure it's there, but I couldn't pick it out. Because the increase, I believe, was 7%, 6%.
Well, I have a breakdown of the 10.2 overall in terms of the different components.
Well, on page 5, it talks about absorbing 7.6% wholesale rate increase, and then another 5% in January 2013. So I'm assuming of that 10.2, 7.6 is for the increase in rates.
The 7.6 and the 5 are actually the percent increase in the cost of imported water.
Right.
So it doesn't directly pass through because about 2/3 of our budget is purchased water. So the numbers don't quite equate that way. But, but overall, about of the 10.2%, about 6.4% is for wholesale increase.
Okay.
And that's for the two increases, both this January and the expected increase in 2013, January 2013.
Okay.
And then for our capital replacement fund, about 1.8% of that, and operational reserve, about 2%. So that all adds up to 10.2. That's kind of how the numbers more or less shake out.
Okay. And then, so again, just to reiterate, was it 9 or 4? 4 for what it costs to buy the water.
Yes.
All right. 1.8 for future capital projects, and that is, basically the infrastructure. And that's really no different than what we did with the wastewater, because I happened to be around 8 years ago when we went through that whole process, and that's so we have reserves in place so we don't have to have massive increases in water rates to pay for infrastructure improvements.
That's correct.
All right. I think it's an important point, and I'm certainly going to hear from the folks tonight, but that's an important point, having gone through that. And I think some of you were here 8 years ago. We had a citizens committee that actually looked at increases in wastewater fees to pay for needed infrastructure. And so I think that's an important point. And then 2% for a reserve, if you will. Is that correct? And
yes,
that's for
yes.
fluctuation of water usage, thereby how much the city receives in revenue.
Absolutely. Unexpected expenses that come up from year to year.
Right. Now, what would happen if we, instead of a 10.2% increase, we took out the 2% for reserves and we dropped that to 8.2%? We'll get to the tier later, but what would be the impact of that?
Our operating reserve had in the past dipped to really, really low levels. And what that does is it puts us in a position where if we should have some unanticipated expense, if our water sales went down significantly, we would be in a position where basically we couldn't pay the bills.
Right.
So,
is there a recommended industry standard for what water municipalities that provide water, what their revenues or reserves should be?
Absolutely.
And what is that?
Well, it's more like 25%, a 90-day reserve. And what we're actually recommending, and this came, as part of our water financial plan work with our consultant, and is actually less than that, 16%.
Right. Okay.
So we're
what other cities? Yeah. What other cities have a 25% water reserve fund?
Can you answer that? I ask our consultant to provide some.
Okay, because
context.
That was just a broad question. My follow-up question is what like cities to Thousand Oaks have a 25%? And it's okay if the answer is none, because everybody's having a difficult time making it by. That's fine. We just want accurate information. That's all. We put out 25% as the industry standard. If no one's meeting it, I think it's important information for the public and the council.
Yeah, a typical operating reserve is 60 to 90 days. Most agencies we're working with lately don't have 90 days in reserves because everybody's in the same position.
Are you using your mic? Because I don't know if you're being able to get picked up on the record.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Much better.
A typical operating reserve is 60 to 90 days. A lot of the agencies that we're working with aren't holding that in reserves right now because everyone's in the same boat as Thousand Oaks.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I don't have a list of cities that are holding 25% in operating reserves, but, you know.
How about other cities that are operating at a 60-day reserve?
Most agencies we're working with lately are only holding 60 days, or the ideal, what we're trying to get to with a water rate adjustment or increase is 60 days.
Right. How many of the cities that we compared to with respect to rates, how many of those are at the 60-day mark? Simi Valley, the county, Oak Park, Cal-Am?
We don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. I will comment, though, that we've not been able to reach our 25% goal in the past, even though we've had the higher goal in past financial plans and as part of past rate adjustments. And we've never been able to make it.
I understand
there.
that.
Yeah.
But we don't know how many other cities are operating at the 60-day mark as opposed to the 30-day mark as opposed to the 0-day mark. Okay. My next question would be, do you know of any cities that are operating with essentially no reserves that in the event that they go through summer and water rates or water sales or usage becomes less? Because I'm assuming it's the summertime, or is it the winter? Sounds like it's backwards. It seems like the winter we wouldn't be using as much water.
Correct. The water sales are much less in the winter.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any cities that don't have any reserve and are essentially rolling the dice?
Well, I know anecdotally that Simi is struggling with the very same thing, but I can't tell you the exact numbers there.
All right. How much, Mr. Minnick or Mr. Watkins, either one, if we did not run the reserve and we go into the winter months, we get high levels of rain, so people are not using their sprinkler systems, which incidentally, I know some of the folks here know this, but the vast majority of water use is through irrigation of outside plants. I know folks are doing a good job of low-flow toilets and short showers and all those other things, but the reality is what, 85% of the water use, or even 90%, is really through irrigation. So that's really the crux of what we're talking about. What would happen if, in the event we didn't have the reserves, when you say we couldn't pay our bills, what kind of money are we talking about? And I notice John Adams is there, and I can't wait for John to step up because all of us are riveted at John's reports. Okay. Do we have an answer?
Our total water fund budget is about $21 million per year. And this reserve would be $2.5–3 million if we were to meet the 16.4%, roughly.
All right. But for the layman, and even the five of us up here, if we were to go through 3 months of very high rainfall, what would that mean? Are we talking a $2 to $3 million hit to the general fund? I'm assuming it would be the general fund because we would be out of reserves. What kind of potential hit is that to the general fund? Here's why this is important. The staff is asking council to make an argument or to approve a recommendation. We're going to have some folks here tonight that say, great job, you've done the committee work, we really appreciate everybody's efforts, but our bill is still too high. And you're asking us to basically make a finding that it would be reckless and financially irresponsible to approve a plan without these reserves. And so I think it's important for the public and the council to understand why it would be irresponsible in dollars and cents. Is it irresponsible to the tune of $500,000, $1 million, $5 million?
And maybe I could hop out here just real quick. Our situation is very similar to that Mr. Keitlinger mentioned for MWD, where a lot of our costs are fixed.
Right.
We have those costs whether we sell any water or not, and we carry those costs, and we do not recover all those costs with our base charge. And so our fixed costs are covered with the variable revenue. And so Should we not receive that revenue, then those reserves will be drawn down. It would be a burden on the general fund. With what Mr. Spurgeon is saying, somewhere in the $22 million range, our revenues are in the range of $2 million a month. And they do vary quite a bit year to year, which is why we've recommended reserves. A couple of options, if we don't have those reserves, is the rates have to be even higher to absorb that variability, or your base charge is much, much higher, so that you're covering more of your fixed charge through a base charge, or you are using the general fund, and that $2 million per month as revenue, you know, depending on rainfall, if you sold half as much, then maybe it would be $1 million a month that you would be drawing out of the general fund or somewhere else. You know, it would vary depending on how much rainfall, how little water you were delivering, but that is the reality of a water system, is that your revenues do vary year to year based upon the weather, and they vary dramatically.
Okay. Okay, so just to summarize, of the 10.2%, 6.4 is for basically the cost of buying water, 1.8 is for basically capital projects to make improvements to our water system so we don't have to raise rates, and about 2% is for reserves.
Correct.
All right, very good. All right, thanks, guys.
Councilmember Glancy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For Mr. Keitlinker, good evening. You mentioned toward the end of your presentation that this year we're going to have more reserves than we've ever had. That being said, that's something that residents really pick up on. We got a bunch of water around. Why should we raise the rates? That's what we always hear.
Sure.
You know, so how much? Well, answer that if you would.
Yes, and the two are disconnected, and that's the tricky part that we always work both with our members and with our cities, and as well as with the public. The amount of money we need has nothing to do with the amount of water we're able to capture, and so the two really are just, you know, have no real direct relationship with each other. The proposed rate increases we are discussing are to pay for all the capital facilities that we continue to build, and we are also working very closely with the state of California that is looking at a very controversial but ultimately somewhat expensive fix to this Bay Delta problem that has been costing us quite a bit of water the last few years. And 2012 is going to be the decision year, and we're going to have to decide, as Southern California, are we going to pay our share for that expensive fix?
Thank you for that answer. Give me your opinion on conservation. Since we've got a lot of water, people will ask, well, why do I need to be so conscious of conservation if we've got a lot of supply?
Conservation has to be a way for Southern California. It has to be a way of life here. We live in a semi-arid region, and we aren't going out. There are no new rivers to tap. You know, if you look at our history, every 30 years we went out and tapped a new river. And then in 1990, we started actually looking around. Are we going to go to the Klamath River, the Columbia River? No, we're not going to do that anymore. Since 1990, Southern California has added 5 million people, and we import the same amount of water today as we did in 1990. All that is primarily due to conservation, recycling, reclamation. It's a real testament to the water ethic in Southern California. But what it means is as people use less and get more efficient, the costs do continue to rise. And so it's not so much that people's water bills are going up, but it is a frustration. They're going, but I'm using much less. I shouldn't be paying more. They're paying them roughly the same because, you know, as you use less, but your bill goes up, it covers the same amount. And that's part of a frustration we hear from the public. But it's also something Southern California can be very proud of, how we have managed to add 5 million people but still use the same amount of water that we used 20 years ago.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for your responses.
Any other questions? Okay, we are now open to public testimony, and if the public has any remaining written protests, please turn them into the city clerk right now. So our first speaker is going to be Mary Giron, and she will be followed by Marilyn Simonet.
Hi, good evening. My name is Margaret Jerem, and I'm here to protest the water rates. I am from Tier 1 district area. A lot of my community in my general area, we're all middle-class income families, which is going to be hit the hardest. On the we're being raised about 57 cents. And the gentleman over there had presented a slide that said that the Tier 1 had done an increase, but yet I see still increase in Tier 3. And so also, majority of the middle-income families are being hit hardest. What happens to us is that we're being squeezed with taxes and everything else in mind, and inadvertently, it's going to affect the schools. We won't be able to provide our fair share to the schools to the support of their band or their choir or anything else. And that's a big concern for us. Indirectly, it will affect the businesses. And I myself and our family has done our fair share as far as removing a lot of our lawn and downsized. We have introduced drought-resistant perennials. Those are a very good idea for people with large landowners if they wanted to look up Better Homes and Gardens. Is a fabulous way of enhancing your lawn and also to downsize. And so that's out of my concern because we are hit the hardest. And that's it.
I just wanted to clarify, you are a Tier 1 user. What area of the...
Tier 1, yeah.
And what area of the city are you in?
Thousand Oaks. But we have the Westlake zip code.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right. Thank you very much for coming down this evening. Marilyn Simodet, and she will be followed by Anita Guarino.
I'm not usually this slow, but I've been sitting for a long time. My name is Marilyn Simodet. I live in the Conejo Oaks area in Thousand Oaks. I've been here since February of 1961. So I have seen a lot of changes and helped make some of the changes. First of all, I wanted to thank the Water Board Committee that I spoke to with Mark there. I spoke to them twice. They listened very, very assiduously, and they were very, very kind. And I explained my situation, being a senior citizen of many years. Secondly, I realized after the presentation was made to you from the Water Board and you turned it down, that because that was based on what you use, you pay, which to me is such common sense. So I realized then, I don't know what you're going to do tonight, that my son and I have to do something different. So I bought 10 32-gallon Brute barrels and saved the water that was coming down from the roof. Didn't have the water, what do you call them, across the gutters, thanks, at that time. Since then, just a couple months ago, my son put in all the gutters. We got the 500-gallon water tanks that we got from up north delivered to the house. And those water tanks are now filled, even with a little bit of water we've had. Since December the 9th, when my last bill came out, we have used 5.4 units of water. 5.4 at $3.04 a unit. My big bill is the service charge of $50-some and then the wastewater of $60. I just wanted you to know that somehow we realize, and maybe everyone else here, we sort of can't rely on the city to take care of us. We've got to do for ourselves. And that's what my family is doing, and a few others in our area. Oh, I'm sorry. I should stop.
You have additional time. You can keep going. Yeah.
The light went on. I'm very obedient. I thank you very much for looking into this tonight, and I don't know how you're going to vote on it, on the tier system. no matter what you do, I know it's going to go up for us. I'm always in the Tier 1, except the big bill of $577 when we all started to complain. Then I went into Tier 2 and 3, never realizing, the first time in my life. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Anita Gorino, followed by Michael Adams. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for listening to me tonight. I'm not going to say a lot, but this is my first council meeting, and I'm really excited about what's going on here. I voted for all of you. I've lived in Thousand Oaks for 27 years, and I love living here, and I'm proud to be a resident here. But I'm beginning to feel like Thousand Oaks is trying to force people like me out. I work very hard. I live on top of Kevington, on top of Sapra. Not only do I pay huge pumping charges, but I have a half an acre of ground. It's to the point where my biggest bill is the water bill. And I've done everything in my power, including the first thing I did was call the city and have their expert come out on conserving water. He checked everything. We did everything. I put in the recommended sprinkler heads. I mean, all this cost me money, but I thought, okay, maybe I need to pay my share, so I'm going to do what I can. My bill went up. It's because I keep hitting that I have to pay Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And I think at one time we had Tier 4. I don't know what happened to that. Or is that my electric bill? Never mind. I love living in this city. I think I've earned to retire in this city. And I'd like to be able to retire in the home that I worked very hard to buy. The half an acre of ground, I have fruit trees. I mean, years ago, that's what we did. I put in a drip system to save water. Everything is okay, but my front lawn looks like I live in another neighborhood. I don't care. I just want to continue to live in this town. So thank you for your consideration of even wanting to hear about what we're suffering. I know that it costs money to run a business. I have a business. I have to keep working so I can pay my water bill. So it's a hard decision you all have to make, but I really think, please keep us in mind. Us who have to pay those $750 every 2 months in the summer. It's hard. It's more than I pay for gasoline. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guarino. Michael Adams, followed by Raymond Sachs.
Hi, Mayor Irwin and members of the council. Thanks for having me this evening. We're here again for our annual water rate increase, and well, I guess as the saying goes, we've got to stop meeting like this. Water rates in Thousand Oaks now have gone up, doubled in 5 years. Inflation during that same period has only gone up by 12%. Connection charges also have doubled during this period, and a lot of times it seems that it's blamed on the water suppliers, but connection charges are a fixed charge. Even if you don't use a drop of water, your bill has now doubled. These rate increases this go around are ostensibly from the Caligas Water District. I happened to look at their financials from 2009 to 2010, and here's what I found out. During that period, cash payouts to employees went from $3.9 million to $7 million. Their cash and investments, that's their cash reserves, went from $208 million to $298 million, up 43% in 1 year. Their annual pension funding per employee went from $492,000 to $912,000, up 86% in 2 years. Frankly, you know, I've heard the presentations this evening. I'm not convinced they're running a tight ship. I just saw an article today that Metropolitan Water District, 65% of their employees have compensation over $100,000 a year. That's way above what the average public, the public is making right now. And of course, a lot of people are out of work with the recession. We heard from Mr. Spurgeon this evening that our cost of water now is $1,000 an acre foot. A couple years ago, I proposed that we look into desalinization. I was assured that a desalter project was in the works, and that water for desalted water would be about $800. We're now $200 more an acre foot, or 25% of where we should be. I guess the question is, when are we actually going to take action to really dig down and stop doing superficial analysis on why our water rates are continuing to go up? And I propose this to the council, for one of you to take the lead and really dig into this and put an end to these water rates. I think it would be a huge political coup for anybody who did that and could put on their resume, I stopped the water rate increases for Thousand Oaks.
Mr. Adams, I mean, just to clarify, you're not with actually City of Thousand Oaks, right? You're Cal-Am?
Oh, I'm not with anybody. I'm just a resident.
No. I meant your water supply.
My water comes from City of Thousand Oaks.
Oh, it does come from City of Thousand Oaks. Oh, yeah, and I will make sure to have the gentleman from MWD address your comments.
Okay, thank
you
very much.
Thank you very much for coming down this evening. Raymond Sachs, followed by Tom Goines.
Good evening, folks. My name is Raymond Sachs. I've lived in Thousand Oaks for almost 40 years. I listened to Mr. Watkins again, and he said the majority of, or at least a big part of the city water's costs are fixed. It seems to me that when the majority of your water costs are fixed, you'd want to sell as much water as possible to disperse those costs over as many units as possible, but that's just common sense. And I don't know where that gets us with the city. It kind of makes me wonder what the city council considers a good job when it comes to handling the city's water supply. I know what it means to me. It means procuring safe, ample supply of water for my family, my animals, and my household. It means I expect the city to fight for the water rights that have been paid for by the residents of this city and not knuckle under to pressure from socialist central planners in Sacramento, nor formulate their own socialist market principles and force them down our throats. For the past 2 years, the city management of this utility has been a disaster. It is this reason that I protest the water rate increase. Paying for an increased commodity is one thing, paying for political utopian meddling is another. I'd like to look for a second on how a lot of this got started. Someone here got the bright idea that they knew more about my family's needs for water than I did. Some idiot then decided that they could indict me for wasting water by simply looking at my water bill. They accomplished this by setting up what they affectionately call a tiered water rate structure. You can call this model whatever you like, but it is anything but free market. Perhaps the Saul Alinsky model is more appropriate. According to Alinsky, the world is comprised of the haves, the have-nots, and the have-a-little want-mores. The master planners here at the city call this a tiered water rate structure. This is not a tiered water model. This is class discrimination, and its sole purpose is to move money from one class of water user to another class of water user via fines defined by tiered usurious rates. Regardless of whom you wish to credit, the city has divided us into classes. Within the class structure, the city favors some and fines others. Depending upon the size of your family, a class member, you are no longer able to pay the commodity rate. Instead, you are forced to pay for water on a class rate, which ranges from below the commodity rate to above it. The city can court you, favor you, or if you are part of the class majority, while billing a percentage of your water to those of the class minority. In this model, large family households are classified and penalized as water wasters without any evidence, without trial, without due process. Many of us formed as a group to protest the city's discrimination of our water class. The city masterminds threw us a bone and formed a water committee. The city masterminds stacked the water committee with many from the subsidized class. They undoubtedly thought they had bribed enough committee members with a subsidized water rate structure to have them recommend that they continue to support the class water structure and continue to provide them with the political clout that they were looking for. When the committee reported the recommendation that the city drop the class structure and return us to commodity pricing, one where we all pay the same, we were just ignored. The arrogance of you people is amazing.
Mr. Adams, you're going to have to wrap it up.
I will. I asked the City Council, what about the facts that we don't wish to be classified by you as the rich or the poor? We object to your political market tinkering, and we want you to sell us water at the rate that the city pays for it. We don't want to pay for the water of others, nor do we want to pay for others to pay for our water.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Raymond Sachs, followed by Tom Goines.
I was Sachs.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tom Goines, followed by Don Reynolds.
Council members, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Tom Goins, and I reside in a home I purchased over 25 years ago on Waverly Heights Drive. The property is a half an acre. I'm still trying to understand why I'm being punished for attempting to simply keep my property looking like my family, my neighbors, and the city of Thousand Oaks would like me to keep it. I frankly never understood or agreed with the tier level system because I do not understand why someone who lives on a smaller piece of property should be able to pay less for their water than I do. They pay the same rate for the same number of toilets that I do. Why should their water usage be any different? If I use more water than they do, paying the same rate they do, I would simply pay more. I also cannot understand why the council would override the recommendation of a committee they approved, who apparently reached that same conclusion. 2 pay periods ago, my water usage was 65 units. That is on a house where every outside use of water is on a timer-controlled system or a timer-controlled drip system. Last billing period, I used a total of 37 units. This difference was not because of additional measures on our part, simply management of those time systems based on weather. Using my water history, your new proposal would still keep me in Tier 3 rate, and I assure you there is no one in this room that manages the use of their water any better than we do, because we're on a fixed income and raises to that income do not come at the same rate and percentage that most working people enjoy. I would also additionally like to point out that using my usage over the last 2 billing periods, my proposed rate would increase 7% if I was successful in reducing my usage from 65 units to 35 units, and would decrease 0.2% if I keep my usage the same. This type of math simply makes no sense to me. And that's from your charts, by the way. I respectfully recommend that you go back to the proposals submitted by the committee that revised these proposals. While you do note the committee approved these new recommended increases by a vote of 8-2, let me point out this was their second vote after the council rejected the original recommendation in favor of something that council wanted to see approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Don Reynolds, followed by Michael Wurtsom. Evening.
Good evening, Mayor Irwin and committee, council members. My name is Don Reynolds. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. Specifically, I live in the Canal Oaks area for 36 years on a larger piece of property. I'm here tonight to ask the council to reject your tiered rate structure, and I will give you my rationale for that. The council's objective has been to conserve water, a worthy objective. If we don't conserve too much, then that'll cost us more as well. The question you should be asking is how much less water is being used by having a tiered rate structure imposed on residential customers. The consultants on the committee, and I was there maybe 2 or 3 meetings, I couldn't answer that question. It was, well, if you charge more, you probably use less. The trouble is, you're charging more to a very small community of your users, not the total community. Much like gasoline, conservation can only be achieved when all the users feel the cost. When you use more, you pay more. We large property owners have understood this from the day we bought our property. We understood we would be paying more because we would have to use more. Your committee, after thorough study and with the help of your appointed consultants, recommended you return to a flat rate structure. This is the fairest approach. It is the simplest approach, and that's usually the best approach. If you use more water, you're going to pay for more water. If you reduce your usage, you're going to pay less. Simple fact. To place a higher burden of paying for water on the small minority of users, and I think the number is 9% of the properties in the city are getting hit by these higher tiers, cannot achieve overall water savings, water reduction. The tiered rate system, in effect, subsidizes a majority of users and reduces their incentive to reduce water usage. The tiered rate system is totally arbitrary, as the recent structure studies that you have authorized have shown. Why is a single rate, commodity rate, okay for everybody but residential users? If it's good for residential, you ought to apply it across the board. I suggest it's not good for everybody. The current rates proposed will actually increase my bill. I'm in the Tier 2 always. I'm in Tier 3 only rarely. Tier 2 rates have gone up. My bill's going to go up. So this whole objective of trying to help the large property owners, in my case, hasn't helped at all. So therefore, I will ask the council to reconsider your decision to stay with the tiered rate structure, albeit how flat it is, and recommend that you go back to the well-thought-out committee's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Michael Wurtzel, followed by Mr. Kidway.
Good evening, Mayor Irwin, council members, staff, and residents. My name is Michael Wurtzel. I live here in Thousand Oaks. I was on the water committee. The low water usage, I represent the low water usage user. I was one of, I think, maybe the only one on that committee that was. Typically, that's someone who uses below 1,000 cubic feet. Just so you understand, 100 cubic feet represents 748 gallons of water. So when someone says they're using 6,500 cubic feet or 65 units, that's a lot of water. You multiply that times 748, it's a lot of water. So basically, I use below 7,480 a month. I feel the proposed structure, the way it's been recommended that you're going to be voting on, is not equitable to residents since it discounts the rate to large lot owners at the expense of all other residents. And if you take a look at this, it's hard to tell. It's page 13 of the report from NBS, if you take a look at that. And basically, what's happening is when you get into Tier 3, these people are actually getting a discount. And the majority of the users in Thousand Oaks that are basically using anywhere between 5 and 35 units of water are going to be seeing up to 16% increase in their bill. That's per month. Then you multiply that bill times 2, and that's what people pay. So Conejo Oaks property owners represent 9% of the residential users in the city of Thousand Oaks. The other 91% represent between the typical utilization of between 5 and 100 cubic feet. So you'll notice on there in the yellow, and I can leave this with you, like I said, it's page 13, and where people are paying more, and then in the red, the people are getting an actual discount once you start to get to 75. I mean, that's a lot of water, and they're actually paying it at a reduced rate. Their bill really is not going up much from what it currently is. So there's no incentive really at that point to conserve. There's just, it's crazy. Large lot owners in Conejo Oaks, they claim they've been subsidizing everybody else's rates for all these years, and that's really not true. All right, I believe it was around 2 years or so ago, their former supplier was Cal American. Okay? At the time, the city of Thousand Oaks serviced Lynn Ranch. The two swapped service areas. So the city of Thousand Oaks took on Conejo Oaks, Cal American took on Lynn Ranch in their service areas. So at that time, I guess, maybe they weren't hit with the tiered rate system. Then they got hit with the tiered rate system, and it was a shock. So now Cal American is raising their rates, and they have not raised them yet, but I know they are. Everyone else has. So Conejo Oaks would have been hit with higher rates no matter what. And so they just really don't know what that would have been because they are not on there in that service area anymore. The homes that have been built in Thousand Oaks over the last 20 to 30 years,
have more reasonable sized lots. They're master planned communities, and they're built more efficiently, so they use more water. So basically what's now going to be happening is all of those people, all of those homes, the majority of the homes, 91% of the residential users are going to be subsidizing that discount that people are going to be using with no incentive for conservation.
Your time is up, but I do actually have a question. Well, first comment, thank you for serving on the Water Rate Committee. I know that it was a very long process. The Water Rate Committee did recommend a flat rate, and if with the revised tiers, obviously your bill is, it's better than the flat rate would be for users like you, right?
With a flat rate, it would have shifted a huge burden onto people in the 5 to 3,500 cubic foot range. Their bills would have tripled, and really it would have been crazy. And basically, there certainly wouldn't have been any incentive for conservation, because at, I think it was around, $3.50 of unit, people would be watering their lawns all day long.
But in some ways, you're just kind of making the point, the tiers that the city had implemented a couple of years ago, and then versus the revised tiers, are somewhat of a compromise between the flat rate and the old.
I don't know that it's really a compromise. I think that if anything, I think that the majority of Thousand Oaks is really going to be subsidizing a discount for these other large lot users. It's unfortunate, but when people came here and moved here 35 years ago and bought those large homes, no one foresaw that those rates were going to go up like that. But the lots didn't change. The size of the homes didn't change. They're still big. They still use a lot of water. It's just the nature of that particular residence.
All right. Thank you very much
thank you.
for your comments. Mr. Kidway, followed by Martin McLaughlin.
Nick Kidway, resident of Newbury Park. Honorable Mayor, first of all, I have a historical revision comment regarding the sewer wars that we had about 10 years ago in this city. It was very heated, and one side said that the raise was a plan to overdevelop the city, and the other side said that they're trying to keep the sewage rates down so that there would be no development, and developments like Dos Vientos, Langrands, SNS homes would not be built out. As we have learned now that it was a wise move to raise the rates, and we are not being overcharged. After saying that, I would like to say that you should be like the city of Ventura, that you should limit the staff time for reports. You limit us to 3 minutes. The citizens do not really have an adequate time to respond, but the staff just go on and on and on. And then you should ask the questions after the residents have been here. People have already left home. Regarding the single-tier and three-tier system, the gas company, the electric company, the phone company has a lifeline. It's about time that this city came up with a lifeline for residents who are retired and on fixed income, because you are just kicking them out of the homes that they have worked all time for. And I do not want our senior citizens to have to move to Pismo or to Lancaster because they cannot afford to live in this town, because water is not a widget that these folks in Metropolitan Water District or you are producing. God creates water, and you are slowly destroying our nation, where citizens in the richest country cannot even take baths or water their yards without thinking how they will pay their bloated bills. There is no incentive for these people to save on their costs, because they have us, the captive slave customers. I also come here representing the stepchildren of Newbury Park. You collect, I pay about $5 a month. Over 30 years, how much have I paid in franchise fees? I would like staff, I know you are dealing with the city, but we would like to know how much you collect in franchise fee from Cal-Am and the other purveyors, and more importantly, what are we getting in return? What are you doing to fight for that, Mr. Fox? You're reading something. You don't have time to listen to citizens. Somebody wrote in the Acorn that, we cannot be drinking or eating over here. I'm hungry for dinner, but you folks eat and snack all the time, and Mr. Fox is still reading. One of the reasons these rates have gone up is because of the Delta smelt issue. And you never joined NFIB, and it was not heard by the Supreme Court because we did not have enough support. Give a break to the seniors. That's what I say.
Thank you, Mr. Kidway. Martin McLaughlin, followed by Shirley McLaughlin.
Mayor Irwin, council members, my name is Martin McLaughlin. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. I happen to live in council members Fox's neighborhood. We have a RO-zoned lot and have animals there. We have 3 horses, dogs, and we feel that the council should follow the recommendation of the Water Committee. We think it would be fair for everybody to pay the same rate. We pay for our water, and we've learned to conserve. We cut back on watering on our irrigation, using timers and watching the weather and all that. And animals have to drink. We have a usage that we can't cut back on. We have fixed usage that protects our investment. So would really like to see the council follow that flat-tiered recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Shirley McLaughlin, followed by Alice Eaton.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Or I did that backwards, Mayor and Council. My name is Shirley McLaughlin. I've lived in Thousand Oaks since 1968 in the same neighborhood. It's a 25,000 square foot lot, half acre. We've raised a family there, and our water rates have gone up considerably. We've used the same amount of water historically, the same amount, except for when we had 7 children coming and going, it was a lot more. But for the past 20 years, it's been the same use, but our rates have gone up, and we do object to the tiered system, and I would like to see a flat rate. I haven't thought about what that rate would be, but I would like to see a flat rate. I think it's more fair for everyone, and I would like to thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for coming down this evening. Our next speaker is Alice Eaton, followed by Gwen Thompson.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I live in Thousand Oaks in El Conejo, half-acre lot, 2 dogs, 2 cats, bunch of kids. I've heard a lot of people speak. I still think that the best, most common sense way is a commodity pricing, because it's based on usage. All I've seen here is class division, and you've only got 1 person or maybe 2 representing smaller lots that are speaking, and the last speaker was upset because we who have larger lots he wants us to be punished because we have larger lots, and we're getting into fighting one another. What I haven't heard is any talk about the environmental impact from environmentalists up north who are very concerned about the Delta smelt, which I believe is what this $5 billion to $10 billion project that they're talking about, building a pipe to reroute the water around the smelt so we don't have to harm them. And I believe that's the fixed cost that they are talking about or preparing for, and no one has spoken about that. I think we are completely dependent upon the north water supply. My understanding is that the levees up there are in worse condition than in Louisiana. So if we were to have one good earthquake, it would start mixing the salt water and the fresh, could impact our supply. I don't know why we're not looking at desalinization. We have a huge ocean. We could desalinate. There's a big energy producer in Oxnard. You could locate, for the state, you could locate there, desalinate the water, and we could control our costs. Because right now we seem to be we seem to be suffering for environmentalists who are very loud, and they're getting a lot of attention. And we're paying for it, and no one seems to be educating anyone, and no one seems to know what's happening. We just feel like all of a sudden we have to ration. Well, why are we rationing? And why are we punishing people? You're not talking about the underlying realities. People just don't know. And if we don't discuss it, we can't go forward. If you do what you're talking about with the tiers, you're going to effectively punish the large lot owners. And the regular people will never feel it because you're going to protect them. If they were to feel it, then everybody would start going, hey, why is the water going up? Oh, maybe we should look at where our source is. That's the market. And you're effectively getting in the way of the market. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Eaton? Ms. Eaton, I will ask staff to address or make some comments on the Delta smelt issue and desalinization too, because certainly they've been looking at both of those issues. But
I just don't know if everybody knows.
I think that at the end of comments they will bring something up about it. And the unfortunate thing, a lot of those decisions are completely out of our control. But it would be good to educate.
But it's ground up. That's what I feel. We got to let them know. Okay.
Thank you very much for coming this evening. Gwen Thompson, and our last speaker is Nancy Healy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and staff. My name is Gwen Thompson. I live in Conejo Oaks. We have an acre property. I actually also do not support the tiered system. I believe that a flat rate or commodity system would be much better. It would be more fair to everybody, and everybody would feel like they have a voice then. The third tier, even though it is a lowered rate, is still higher, much higher than a real true commodity rate would be. And the first tier is still not feeling a true commodity rate. So yes, we may be getting a break, but we're still paying much higher rates. As far as raising the rates, I understand we have to pay more for water. We're getting charged more for water. I don't understand why we have to put so much in a capital fund when we should maybe consider paying for a capital fund as it's needed, either through assessments or through a special bond issue or whatever else could be done. Why are we paying that much money into a capital fund when we don't even know what capital improvements need to be proposed? So I don't support the tier system. I, in a qualified way, support the rate increase, but not all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. And then I'll have staff also address the issue about the capital reserves. And then our last speaker is Nancy Healy. Oh, Nancy left. Okay. All right. Can we have staff response to public comments? And if you could make sure to address especially some of the issues that the last few speakers brought up. And then could you also talk about tiered, because we had a couple of, well, more than a couple of speakers talk about whether tiered rates encourage conservation or not.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. There are a number of comments from public speakers that we can respond to. Let's start with the tiered rates. Several questions about whether tiered rates actually reduce water use. Tiered rates are certainly the industry standard. I think in a moment I'll ask the general managers to come up as well, and they can provide a broader perspective about who the purveyors throughout Southern California, how many actually have a tiered rate structure, and I think the answer is most certainly do. We enacted our tiered rates in November of 2009. Now, there's a lot of factors involved over the last several years, but our water consumption went from almost over 14,000 acre feet per year to last year we were just under 11,000 acre feet. So we had significant reduction in our water consumption citywide within our city system. There are, again, a number of factors. We've had a drought. There was a lot of water conservation outreach that we were doing during that time. Of course, there's economic factors, the recession, but we also had tiered rates during that period of time. So some more than anecdotal evidence that, at least in our system, we've seen a significant decrease in water consumption after we enacted tiered rates. Local supplies, alternative supplies to imported water, this is something that staff is currently engaged in. Mrs. Mulligan mentioned a regional partnership between several local purveyors. We're looking at one of the resources that's in our area, not certainly in the city limits, but groundwater that is too salty to just pump and deliver. And in some of the areas of within the Pleasant Valley groundwater basin, underneath the city of Camarillo, there are these areas, this groundwater that's basically unusable unless it's treated. And so we are working on assessing the quantity, the yield from those basins, how, legally do we have the right to pump additional water, what the cost would be. So we've done some preliminary engineering on reverse osmosis treatment. There is the salinity management pipeline that Mrs. Mulligan mentioned that's being constructed that will be available for that location, the location that we're looking at within the next couple of years for disposal of the brine. And that is one of the issues with desalting any kind of water, whether it's seawater, whether it's salty groundwater. What do you do with the reject, the brine, the concentrate? This pipeline was designed and has been constructed over the past, decade, with 6-7 years, with this very thing in mind, to make better use of local resources. So that's something that we don't have available right here in the Conejo Valley. Number one, we don't have a significant groundwater basin that we could tap into. There is groundwater here. It's not like what we see down on the Oxnard Plain, of course. And then we don't have a way to convey the salty reject, the disposal problem. So we're gonna partner with agencies to do that project. That should give us, we're projecting right now maybe 10 to 20% of our supply needs. And the speaker was about right in terms of its cost. It's probably 10 to 20% less than imported water. So that's not obviously that lower price wouldn't apply to all of our water because it would only be a portion of that. But we are pursuing that with Callegas, with the City of Camarillo. Again, we're looking at probably a 2-year window to have that online. We'll be giving council updates as that project goes forward. Seawater desalination is certainly feasible. It's done throughout the world. There's been a number of studies locally to look into that, even probably 20 years ago almost, the city of Ventura, and I was part of a study that we looked at seawater desal at the time. Yes, there's resources, there's outfalls, there's energy sources, but that's very expensive because it's very salty source water. That's probably at least double the cost of imported water, even at its current level. There are projects that are being planned, and maybe Mr. Keitlinger can mention other areas in the service area where desal is being planned and designed right now. But locally, the best resource we have is to go after the groundwater supplies. Several of the speakers talked about their water usage, their bills. Some of the larger properties, the water use is high. I mean, there's no getting around that. One of the things I wanted to make sure that our audience here and the viewing public knows about is the city does offer free water surveys. This is a program that we've done literally scores of surveys throughout our service area. We have staff go out, look at the residents, provide some recommendations to help reduce water use. And that's bottom line is lower bills are a result. The only way you can get a lower bill is reduce your water use. So that's available. Folks can call the city number, and we can arrange for those water surveys. Back to conservation and tiered rates. While it is true that the drought is over, that was declared by the governor recently, and we have good supplies in the state system and in the metropolitan system, as Mr. Keitlinger mentioned, we still have, basically, we're just a few years from the next drought. I mean, we've seen it over and over again. It's a cyclical thing. We're in an arid area, Southern California. We also have state mandates to reduce our overall consumption 20% by 2020. That's that 20 by 2020 proposal that came out of Governor Schwarzenegger's water plan. So that's something that's still out there. We have to meet that, and so we can't ignore long-term water conservation. I think it's a fact of life that we need to continue to plan for. a lifeline water rate. It is true the other many of the utility companies provide for that. We are actually prohibited from subsidizing lower income water customers through Prop 218, but we do have a assistance program here at the city. There's some outside funding that's available and can provide some relief for lower income, fixed income water customers. Again, if you call the city number, we can get folks connected with that and provide whatever assistance might be available there. Capital improvements, they are listed. They're all listed in terms of what projects are planned for the water system over the next 5 years. Those are included in our adopted capital improvement budget. That plan is available via our website, so if people are interested in exactly where those capital dollars are going for, at least over the next 5 years, they can certainly look at that plan online and see the specific projects. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Mulligan to address one of the speakers' comments about the Cayugas budget. There's some specific numbers that were commented on, and then Mr. Keitlinger, I think, is best suited to talk about the Delta issues, the smelt, what's going on environmentally there, the proposed fix, and also provide some perspective on tiered rates and desal throughout his service area. So, Mrs. Mulligan first, and Mr. Keitlinger.
Actually, Mr. Spurgeon, before you turn off your mic, you mentioned the governor's 20% by 2020. If we don't make that, we're penalized financially, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding. There's probably state grant funding that would not be available to us, that kind of things like that, if we did not meet that, yes.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to respond to the figures that were put out, that were also some figures that were in a letter to the Acorn a few days ago. I asked our manager of finance, hired about 9 months ago, Dan Smith, to take a look at our financial statements and try and duplicate and figure out where those numbers came from. I believe there were three major contentions, and they all relate to the fact that Cayugas changed auditors 2 years ago, so that the way that things were reported in our financial statements changed over the period. Cash payments were reported as going, cash payments to employees reported as going from 3.9 to 7 million. In the earlier year, that was reported salaries and didn't include benefits. In fact, between fiscal 09 and fiscal 10, salaries and benefits went up 4.7%. And then the following year, the year I was hired, salaries and benefits went down, or hired into this job. Cash and investments, there was a statement that they went up by about 90 million, and that is true. They went up because Cayugas borrowed money to build the capital projects that I described earlier. So that was due to borrowing. We have all but 32 million in our capital reserves designated for projects that are already approved for our board for design and construction. We have about 58 million for operating reserves, due in part to the need to hold money to buy water to refill the well field should there be an earthquake. And then finally, PERS funding per employee it said that it went from 492,000 to 914,000. Just to clarify, that was not a per employee statement. Our manager of finance couldn't find where the 492 went to, but he looked at all of our payments to PERS, and they went, in that year, they were 835,000. So they've increased fairly insignificantly as well. So that's a lot of detail, but it really is related to accounting practices rather than any changes in what we're paying our employees.
Thank you very much. Just before I do make a couple of comments, I do want to commend the City Council and the staff for the high degree of professionalism here. And this has been a very thorough presentation, a very thorough discussion. Metropolitan delivers water to well over 300 retailers of water throughout Southern California, mostly cities. And so you I've been to a few of these, and this is one of the most detailed ones I've seen. So it's a great job. A couple of quick comments on a few things I've seen here. Reserves. Metropolitan has reserves. We rely on those reserves because there is no such thing as an average year in California. Last year turned out to be the third wettest year in our recorded history. This year, as we sit here today, is shaping up to be the driest year in our recorded history. Hopefully some storms will change that, but that's where we are. We live in an extremely volatile state. We can't go out and say, you know, it's raining, we're going to not raise rates, or it's not raining, we need to raise rates. We have to plan. We raise our rates 18 months in advance because we want to give cities 12 months in advance so that they can raise their rates and plan on it accordingly. The only way we can do that 18-month plan ahead and look ahead when we have absolutely no idea what the weather's going to do or what's going to happen or earthquakes is by having reserves to cushion those blows. And so we're a large agency. We have commensurately larger reserves than smaller agencies. Small agencies are at the risk of a single lawsuit or claim wiping out reserves in a single blow. So reserves are, you know, a necessary, valuable tool in the utility business, and it's something we all sort of rely on. Secondly, your staff commented on the Schwarzenegger's administration, 20% by 2020. We're all wrestling with how best to do this in a relatively compressed time frame. We're sitting here in 2012. We have 8 years to do this. Most agencies are on track. They are meeting their goals. But we're adding $165,000 a year into our service area every single year, and that's even with a down economy. So we do continue to grow population-wise, and we're going to have to add more water efficiencies to that. Industry standard for cities is tiered rates. Of the 300-some cities in our service area, there are some that haven't moved to tier rates, but I don't know of a single city over 100,000 population that hasn't done that. It has been what the industry and what the cities have done in response to these times. And typically what we do is we even have a two-tiered rate system, even at the wholesale level. And when we allocate water, which is we don't ration water, we allocate, which in other words, cities can buy whatever they want, but they're going to have to pay a lot more for it. The penalties that kick in are much like a tiered system. And so the way most cities have avoided penalties when we allocate water is they have the exact same sort of structure where they tier it as well. Comments on the Delta Smelt. I've learned a lot more about Delta Smelt than I ever thought I'd know the last 3-4 years, and it is an incredible challenge for California as we deal with both the Federal Endangered Species Act, California Endangered Species Act, how we move water for people and protect the environment at the same time. We are spending, as a state, which Southern California is funding half this effort, $250 million in the planning effort alone to result in a plan to build a $10 billion project. That is our system these days. We plan. It's a 6-year planning process before we can get a permit to even build a fix to it. All that said, your staff's right. It's still roughly the cost of that fix and the cost of imported water is still going to be about half the price of desalination water from ocean desalination. Ocean desalination is feasible, it's doable, and it's probably appropriate to do it where we need to. It's also very expensive. To replace the Delta water that we have, the Northern California water from the State Water Project that Southern California receives would require a desal plant the size of the largest in the world today every 4 miles between San Diego and LA. To date, California has yet to cite one sizable desal plant. Carlsbad is the closest. It's one that Metropolitan had put forward a subsidy to get built. It's 10 years in the planning process. They still haven't gotten all their permits through the Coastal Commission. Desal, I think, is something that's going to come in the years to come, but it's decades to come before it replaces imported water, and it's still going to be a lot more expensive. The only other comment I wanted to make, someone pointed out the average cost of a Metropolitan employee is higher than the average cost of other public agencies' employees. That comment's very true. It's about 10 to 15% higher than your typical public agency. We are a fairly unique agency. We are a wholesaler. We're specialized. We don't have meter readers or other things. We have our actual cost of labor is half of that in most cities. Our total labor budget is 15% of our total budget, and that's because we aren't a staff-driven agency. We're an infrastructure-driven agency, and most of our employees tend to be pretty specialized. And with that, unless there's any questions, thank you.
Well, very thorough presentations today. Why don't we start with Dr. Glancy?
Mr. Keitlinger, come on back up. Thank you. You mentioned that, to your knowledge, every one of the retailers that you use, over 100,000 people have tiered rates. Is there hard data to support the relationship between tiered rates and conservation effects?
There's a number of studies out there that have been put out nationally by the American Water Association, AMWA, and as well as AWWA that have ranges in there that show that tiered rates do save, and there's dispute about the specific ranges, but there are ranges that are pretty well common industry standards.
Okay, fine. It's not just hocus pocus then.
No, these are national reviews that have been taking place.
Thanks a lot.
Councilmember Fox?
I don't have any questions, but I'm ready to start the discussion.
Okay. Well, I think I have to close the public hearing then if there's no questions, no further questions. All right, Councilmember Fox?
Let me begin by saying that we've been at this for 2 years. And I think by any fair-minded person, they would look at what the council has done, what the community has done. We even have experts from the water industry saying that they have rarely sat through such a detailed council meeting dealing with water issues. So I want to begin by saying this has been and it is a complex issue that some have tried to simplify, and certainly we understand it. But it has been a complex issue for the city and in many cities. That being said, I'm going to take another shot at trying to convey to the council that the tiered system, notwithstanding what we've heard from staff, is not the right thing for us to do. And the reason is because just basic fundamental fairness dictates that you pay for what you use. We've had a number of, and it's my understanding that in a commodity rate system that staff could bring back, the issues of a rate increase, the issues of capital improvement plans, the issues of reserves could all be addressed. It would just be addressed through a different financial plan. Is that correct, Mr. Watkins? Right. So the issues that staff are most concerned about, the financial issues that staff is most concerned about, can be addressed through basically a fixed rate system. The issue of conservation, I think conservation is important, but we've also heard from the experts that yes, there's been studies, there's been a number of things, and they all point to a tiered system equals some measure of conservation. I think staff did a good job of pointing out that since we've been doing tiered system, we've achieved some conservation. We also have to balance that with we're not in a drought now, and the supplies are good now. We have people sitting in this council chamber now. We're talking about raising rates now. So I think we need to look at what it is we're doing now and what we can do in the future if we see an increase in use to the point where we may pay some penalties. We don't know what those penalties are. But down the road, when they become clearer, we may be back at this again 2 years from now in dealing with proposed penalties to the city because we do not have a tiered rate system. In my view, I think we need to approach this in a more incremental fashion. And the incremental step starts first with going back to a flat system where you pay for what you use. And then if we find over the next year or two that we're not conserving, that we're looking at issues of a 2020 mandate and some of those other issues, I think we have ample time to come back and revisit that situation. I would also remind the council that over the years, the city and other cities have been, quote, threatened with a reduction of grant funds if you don't make some unfunded state mandate towards whatever it happened to be was on the governor or the legislature's mind at the time. It's 2012. This was imposed by a governor who is not in office anymore. One thing I can assure all of you, politics equals change. And what is there now may not be there in 2020. And so I think to put a tiered system in and use the issue of 2020 as a rationale for why we're increasing rates on everybody, I don't think is really reasonable or fair. That being said, my recommendation and my motion is going to be that we do not follow staff recommendation, notwithstanding staff's done a great job on this, and I recognize we're going to give you guys some more headaches. but that we do not implement a tiered rate system, that we recommend that staff bring back a commodity rate system that addresses rate increases that the city pays, a capital improvement plan, and reserves that are sufficient to keep the city afloat in our water fund when we have periods of decreased use. That's my motion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fox. I actually had left out, Ms. Lawrence was going to read the results of the tabulation.
The total number of the notices issued by the city on the proposed water rate increase was 16,609. The total number of valid protests received were 127, which includes 8 protests received this evening pending verification. Based on the results, there are insufficient protests received for a majority protest.
Dr. Glancy?
Thank you. I'd like to ask the motion maker a question. As to a previous meeting, I believe we made the motion and accepted that we'd have staff come back and give us refined data on flat rate, and it hadn't happened yet. It seems like that needs to be addressed. I tend to be fairly proactive and not reactive. I'd rather not count on divine intervention to solve our problems. I don't have a lot of faith with that. This is basically brown country. When you fly over it in an airplane, you look down, things are brown, other than along the river where things are green. But it is brown country. It's semi-arid. We need to be very mindful of conservation, not just for the money that it represents, but for saving the planet. We need to, and I'm not on the, well, anyway. We need to be very mindful of our reserves because the infrastructure is extremely important. If things got out of hand with the infrastructure falling to pieces, it's going to cost considerably more to repair it than it would be if we were proactive in the repair of it. So I've got some questions about the motion and whether how much can be handled by staff before we go further.
Councilmember Bildo.
I am not at all in support of the motion until I have all the information from staff regarding flat rates, which we didn't receive tonight.
Yeah, the motion would be that that staff would bring back a financial plan that involved a commodity rate, not a tiered system, and it would address the proposed rate increases, it would address the capital improvement plan, and it would address the reserves. I guess to simplify it, what I'm proposing is we do not do the tiered system. We go back to the commodity rate, but all the aspects of the rationale for why we're increasing, there will be a rate increase, obviously. That's done within the context of a commodity rate, not a tiered system. What that number is, I don't know what that would be. Staff's got to bring that back. And if we'll make the council in terms of so you can look at apples and apples, if staff wants to bring back this tiered rate system, which is a condensed tiered rate system or flattening tiered rate system, which is what we asked for, and compare that to commodity rate, I'm okay with that too. I'm just my mind, at least at this point, is sufficiently satisfied that the commodity rate is where we need to go now.
As I understand it, the current rate which the customers are paying is the one that has the difference of 22%, not 7.5?
Yes.
Correct. And that would remain in place until staff came back with yet another study, another analysis sometime this year?
No. Not study, not analysis. They're bringing back a report, and they're bringing it back as soon as possible. And yes, the rates that they're paying now is what they're paying now. That can't change. Unless you want to adopt this tonight, which universally, whether you're in Tier 1 or Tier 3, no one's for it.
I realize that. But obviously, how many notices went out? 16,600. And we have to be honest here, not all of us live on large lots. And some of us do. Some of us are directly affected by this rate increase. And I don't know whether that has something to do with it. However, how long would it take for the report to come back?
Well, we have to actually to reopen the public hearing? Okay, so I'm reopening the public hearing.
Yeah, the process was, if you recall, the financial report came to council in December. Council did approve that financial report and set this public hearing. If we were to do it again, we would revise the financial report, bring that to council. Council would have to approve the financial report, then we have to send protest ballots out again. So then those have to go out for a minimum of 45 days. And then we can have another public hearing, take testimony. If council then were to approve that, then those rates could go into, there would be a second reading of the ordinance 2 weeks later. 30 days after that, the rates would go into effect. The impact of that is that we did get a rate increase passed along to us this January 1st. Currently, we are absorbing that increase with our reserves. So we're drawing our reserves down as we speak, and because this financial plan would take into account that increase, and it distributed them in accordance with the council-directed new tiers. So if we were to go back to a flat commodity rate, what I would suggest is council might want to adopt this as the next step so that we don't draw our reserves completely down by the time we get around to doing a commodity rate. We can certainly follow right up with bringing a commodity rate back if that's what council so desires. The direction to staff back in December was not to look at a flat commodity rate. It was to look at lot size-based rates with the Water Structure Committee, and that has not occurred yet.
Okay, I'm not sure how much we paid for the the current financial report. How much more staff time and additional consultants costs would that incur?
To do what?
To do whatever you just mentioned.
Well, to do the lot size based rates, well, there's a couple of things we really need to bring back to council and have decided. When council directed us to reconvene the Water Committee, the Water Committee, if you recall, was comprised of both commercial, multifamily, irrigation, and single-family residential customers. It was a 15-member committee. Since that time, 3 of the members had resigned, and so there's not everybody available. And presumably the commercial, irrigation, multifamily might not be interested in the lot size-based discussion because it only impacts the single-family residential users. And so what staff wanted to do is come back to City Council, try to determine if that committee should continue in its current format, or whether that committee should be reconstituted in a format that was primarily interested in looking at single-family residential. Because at this point, it's a very refined look at this single-family, and we have had some committee members resign. We didn't go through a process to try to reappoint because the committee had wrapped up its work. And so depending on what council directs us to do is how much time it will take to put together that analysis. It will take depending upon the complexity. If it's just going back to single commodity rate, it's not a very complex process. But if it is looking at lot size base rates and others, then it'll take some staff time, it'll take some additional consultant time.
Thank you.
Dr. Glancy has a question for...
A real quick question for Mr. Watkins. If we're absorbing the increase that's come through, how much is that going to affect our reserve? At what rate?
It's not as big a deal right now because we're wintertime, and so we're not selling a lot of water right now. So when we looked at this, we were hoping to have all this done in the fall, have it in place before January, but as it worked out with the Water Committee and timing, here we are at February, so the rate won't go into effect till March. So not a big impact because it's basically January and February, and it's a low water sales. If we go through the whole process again, we start to get into springtime, starting maybe the beginning of summertime, so we'll be absorbing more.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. I'll just make a couple of comments. First, I am completely opposed to the motion. We've gone through this. We voted to flatten the tiers. There were a lot of residents that were affected by the very severe tiers, and we've done a good job of making sure nobody's happy. So I think it's a compromise right in the middle. Some residents have really done what they can to reduce their bills, but the reality is every city that MWD deals with, over 100,000, has tiered rates. We don't have very severe tiering here, but it will encourage conservation. And I just want to remind the council that this is not just about the lack of grants in 2020. This is about last year. If we didn't make our goals, we were going to have a penalty of $2 million that all our residents were going to be paying. So to say, that we're looking at all these years down the road, I think is not accurate. I really feel for the residents that have the large lots, and I think we've tried very hard, and staff has tried very hard to answer your questions, but to put this off longer and go through this whole process again and hired more consultants, I don't think it is a financially reasonable thing to do, and this has already been a 6-month process. So obviously it's up to the council if we want to put this off and study the rates again. The Water Rate Committee had 10 meetings, and they recommended a commodity rate, but they also looked at large lots. But we as a council decided, all of us, that it was unreasonable to go to a commodity rate because of the connection with conservation and the tiered rate. So I don't see going backwards. I don't see going against what every other city is doing. This is, I don't see going against the studies that are out that tiered rates cause conservation. And again, we've tried to do what we could to come up with a compromise with these tiers that don't punish the high water rate users. But there were other users here that are saying that they don't want to subsidize the large rates. So this is a very difficult subject, but I can't see going on with this and studying it anymore. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Final comment? Yeah, thanks. I think what I heard Mr. Watkins say was if we went back to the commodity rate, which was originally recommended by the committee, that would not be a long process at all, that most of that information is available. You can just nod, Mark, if you want. That it would not be a long, drawn-out with all the experts and all that other stuff. It would be a fairly streamlined process. Again, while I recognize that other cities are doing it, many cities are doing it, let's be fair, the information on conservation through a tiered system is minimal at best. It is. It's anecdotal, and we have on the record information that as we stand right now, supply is not an issue. I'm not saying that it couldn't be an issue 5 years from now, but for right now, supply is not an issue. And we don't know how much, if we went back to the commodity rate, in terms of conservation, we would be losing. We haven't measured that I'm aware of. So, and then finally, just for me personally, and I think council's aware of this, I've had a great deal of difficulty kind of getting to the tiered system from day one. I just fundamentally think that you use X amount of water, you pay for X amount of water. If you use more than your neighbor, you pay for it, but you pay at the same rate everybody else is paying. So those are my comments.
Okay, are there any comments, more comments to the motion? So vote on Councilmember Fox's motion, please.
The vote is showing Councilmember Fox, yes. Councilmember Glancy abstaining? Are you voting yes or no? No. Then the motion fails 1-3.
I will go ahead and make the motion that, and again, I think this needs to be done in a timely manner. I'll go ahead and move the staff recommendation. And again, I'm very sorry that we were not able to completely accommodate the people in Conejo Oaks. I think that the less severe tiering was a compromise that was reasonable for all the residents of the city.
I'd like to offer an amendment to that.
Yes?
I'd like to amend that to that we would move forward on the tiered system, but I would also like staff to come back with a plan that basically outlines the commodity rate, which I outlined earlier, so we can have that information. So what that does is that addresses Mr. Watkins' issue with respect to not having anything going into reserves, but at the same time, it provides council with real numbers, real data, and what the commodity rate would be. And if we want to go a different direction, we at least have the information. I don't think there's any harm in that.
Can we vote on that separately, please?
Okay. Yeah, why don't we vote on it? We can vote on it separately then, right? Oh, okay. Do you want to vote on it separately? Do you want to make a comment to that motion?
It's an amendment to the motion that they bring back basically a staff report. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. So we're moving forward on this.
We're moving forward, but it's just a staff
so,
report.
No, I'm going to keep the amendment in.
Because it's only a staff report, and we're moving forward on the motion. Dr. Glancy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will support the amendment because I think it's a reasonable request, as long as we go ahead and move on staff recommendation right now.
All right, vote please.
The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Gillette absent, and I just need to read the ordinance titles. An ordinance adjusting and setting fees and discharge limits and restating rates of the City Wastewater Division, and an ordinance adjusting and setting rates and fees of the City Water Division.
We are on department reports, and this should be much more fun. Will Chu, our associate planner, is going to be talking about Department Report 1A, request to allow indoor plastic BB weapons discharged within city limits, and the applicant is Patriot Airsoft, LLC. Good evening, Mr. Chu.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Item 10A tasks council to approve a request to discharge discharge of gas, electric, or gas or battery-powered weapons, which are also known as BB guns, within an indoor facility. On January 23 hearing, Planning Commission hearing of this year, the Planning Commission approved a special use permit for a commercial recreational facility that deals with the airsoft activity. However, the approval of discharge of BB guns in the city is regulated and may only be allowed with the written approval of the City Council. With this, the municipal code basically prohibits discharge of such weapons in the city with some exceptions. One of the exceptions is if the activity is done within a private facility where the projectiles cannot leave the facility. With this regard, the staff is recommending that the council approve the indoor facility because it complies with the city's municipal code, and authorize staff to convey the approval to the applicant in writing. This is in, let's see. This will be an approval of this will allow will provide for additional recreational service in the city in compliance with Council Goal G. With that, staff is ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question regarding CEQA. It says that it complies with CEQA. Can you explain, given the fact that it will emit gases, how that is in compliance with CEQA?
Basically, this is it will discharge carbon dioxide gases. It's not something that's regulated by the by any agency in this amount. So it complies. Also in regards, it's also exempted from CEQA because it's a minor alteration in the use of an existing facility.
Very good, thank you.
Right, Anthony Week is our public speaker.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
I never thought water would be such a tough act to follow, but just really simply, thank you for giving me the time to talk about my business. I am the co-owner of Patriot Airsoft with my wife, who had to leave with our small children. I'm a long-time Thousand Oaks Newbury Park resident, graduated from Newbury Park High School. My wife graduated from Newbury Park High School. And as I told the Planning Commission, I'm raising a family here now. There's no way I would want to do something that's a detriment to the community. And in fact, I think this does the opposite. I think this is needed in the community. It's something else for the children to do. Airsoft is a growing hobby. And I don't know if you saw, the Acorn did a little article on our business. And since that article, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people are looking forward to this opening and being able to bring their children. And it's available for children and adults. I mean, I've played with my son. Fathers can play with their sons. Anybody can play. And I think it's a much needed thing in the community. One more thing to keep children off the streets, which is illegal. As you just heard, you cannot fire them on the city streets, which occurs probably daily. If you drive through the community, there's some kid playing with an airsoft pistol that he bought at Big Five and doesn't understand the rules. So hopefully I'll provide an establishment where they can come, play with their gun legally, learn how to play with it safely. As a law enforcement officer currently, safety is a big issue with me, so I'll make sure that they learn some of those kind of safety issues, so even if they're not in my facility, they know how to handle these weapons appropriately. And so I thank you again for your time, and I just hope you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Week. We have one speaker card, and that's Alice Eaton, who is also in favor of having indoor airsoft. Councilmember Bill De La Pena.
Move approval of staff recommendation.
Comments to the motion? Actually, I have a quick comment. I think, we are always hearing about how there's not enough for kids to do, so I think this is going to be an excellent facility. I know that my boys will really enjoy coming there. And the other thing that I'm very concerned about is these kids using airsoft guns. They look exactly like real guns. They break off those fluorescent tips, and they're putting their lives in real danger. So I'm very happy that you came up with this concept. I think you're going to be very successful. Vote, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
Committee, commission, congratulations. Committee, commission, and board reports, there are none. Item 12, City Council, a successor agency to Thousand Oaks Redevelopment Agency reports, and John Adams will be presenting that report.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. This evening, staff is in front of you for the first agenda item related to the successor agency. So this is your first action as the successor agency for the Thousand Oaks Redevelopment Agency. On page 88 of your agenda packet, we outlined the reason for this report, which is to give authority to the treasurer, the city treasurer, to invest funds of the former redevelopment agency. The state is requiring a new resolution for the successor agency. And so tonight in front of you is that resolution, and staff is available for any questions.
Councilmember Bill De La Pena.
Ready to make a motion?
All right.
Move staff recommendation.
Vote, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
Council issues and recommendations, follow-up reports on meetings and conferences. There are none. And now we have our city manager report.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, no additional follow-up. The next city council meeting will be on February 21st, and at this point in time, we have one public hearing scheduled, and that has to do with an amendment to the Community Development Block Grant Action Plan. Essentially, $375,000 will be recommended to be committed to an affordable housing project. Department reports this time, we have a couple potential one dealing with the city. We may actually recommend that we bid on the Simi Valley Library project. That's it right now for city manager follow-up. So thank you.
I have our city attorney, Mr. Norman, please announce the closed session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The City Council will adjourn into closed session to just have a conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9B, one potential case. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9C, one case, and public employment, title city attorney pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. It is not anticipated that there will be any reportable action from these closed sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. There are no public notices this evening. And finally, our adjournment this evening is in memory of Bruce Hanson, the city's police representative to the Planning Commission from 1990 to 1994. Bruce began his career in law enforcement while serving in the Air Force as an MP. After his military service, he worked in various public safety departments until he found a home with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, where he served for nearly 30 years. He held a master's degree in public administration from Cal State Northridge. After retiring, Bruce moved to Henderson, Nevada, a city he referred to as Paradise. On behalf of the Thousand Oaks City Council, we send our sincerest condolences to Bruce's family and friends. He will be greatly missed by all of those who knew him. And we are going to be adjourning to our regular meeting on February 21st, 2012. Good evening, everybody.